Born into the Fire Nation royal family, Zuko enjoyed a life of privilege, although his father Ozai's disapproval was evident from the start. Despite a period of relative peace within the family, Zuko began to experience emotional abuse from Ozai and his sister Azula, while finding solace in the support of his mother Ursa and uncle Iroh. In 95 AG, Zuko faced significant upheaval as his cousin Lu Ten perished in battle, his mother vanished, and his father ascended to the throne of the Fire Nation. This sudden shift in circumstances resulted in Zuko being named as the new crown prince, yet his father's harsh treatment persisted. At the tender age of 13, Ozai subjected Zuko to an Agni Kai duel as a punishment for speaking out of turn during a meeting, resulting in a permanent scar over his left eye. Refusing to fight back, Zuko was banished by his father, with the sole condition for his return being the capture of the Avatar, a mission that became his primary objective. Accompanied by Iroh and a small crew, Zuko embarked on a journey across the world. Welcome back to ChannelFrederator. Today we are going to take a look at the timeline of Zuko from Avatar. Make sure you like this video if you like it and subscribe to ChannelFrederator for more like this. Alright, let's get right into it. Early years. Zuko, born in 83 AG, was the eldest child of Prince Ozai and Princess Ursa. Almost from the moment of his birth, he faced his father's disdain, stemming from his apparent lack of the typical firebender's spark in his eyes. This uncertainty led Ozai to consider the possibility that Zuko might not be a bender at all, which he found shameful for a firstborn. Consequently, there were plans to abandon Zuko, but the intervention of Ursa and the Fire Sages prevented this fate. Eventually, it was confirmed that Zuko possessed firebending abilities, bringing a temporary peace to the family. During subsequent years, Zuko's family took regular vacations to Ember Island, a period he later regarded as the only time his family was truly content. At the age of 3, a significant event occurred when Zuko witnessed an eagle hawk attacking a turtle crab on the beach. Moved by compassion, he rushed to the crab's rescue. However, upon realizing the consequences for the hawk, he was caught in a moral dilemma. This confusion led to a dangerous situation where Zuko was swept into the ocean by a wave, narrowly escaping drowning thanks to his father's timely intervention. Throughout these formative years, Zuko and his family frequently attended performances of Love Amongst the Dragons at the Ember Island Theater, followed by reenactments of the play's final duel on the beach. Despite often being cast as the Dark Water Spirit, the antagonist of the play, Zuko cherished these memories in later years. The play. In contrast to his strained relationship with his father, Zuko forged a strong bond with his uncle Iroh. From a tender age, Iroh delighted the young prince with displays of his firebending prowess. Upon Iroh's return from military campaigns, he would engage Zuko in Pai Sho games, accompany him to festivities such as the Fire Festival, and occasionally sneak into the royal kitchen together to pilfer snacks, with roasted Komodo chicken being their preferred indulgence. Furthermore, during his early adolescence, Zuko received instruction in dual broadsword combat from Pian Dao, deteriorating relationship with Ozai and Azula. As they matured, Zuko and Azula drifted apart, with Zuko increasingly becoming the target of his sister's manipulation, mockery, and deceit. Zuko perceived that Azula aimed to assert her superiority in firebending skills and in winning their father's favor. Ozai openly expressed disdain for his son, which was attributed to Zuko's moral compass, perceived lack of talent, and the underlying conflict between Ozai and Ursa. Reflecting on his upbringing, Zuko recalled his father's demeanor as distant and harsh. In contrast to their father's demeanor, both Zuko and Azula were recipients of their mother Ursa's affection, although she showed a particular favoritism towards Zuko over his sister. This preference became evident when, during a stroll during the royal garden around 94 AG, Azula's growing hostility toward her brother was palpable. While Zuko happily conversed with his mother, he witnessed Azula setting a flower ablaze. Promptly reporting his sister's actions to their mother, Zuko found himself subjected to Azula's retaliatory act of burning his posterior. Following Ursa's reprimand of Azula and her subsequent confinement to her room, Zuko sought solace in his mother's comforting embrace. Tearfully expressing his confusion over Azula's cruelty, Zuko struggled to comprehend why his sister felt the need to inflict such harm, especially when he believed he was merely acting in accordance with what he perceived to be right. Later, Zuko and Azula strolled once more through the royal garden when the prince decided to demonstrate to his mother how Azula feeds turtle ducks. In his attempt, he threw bread at a baby turtle duck, provoking the ire of its mother, who retaliated by biting Zuko. Ursa swiftly came to her son's aid, explaining that the turtle duck was merely protecting its offspring, akin to any mother's instinct. Shortly after, Azula approached and manipulated Ursa into allowing Zuko to join in her play. Azula devised a game where she deliberately set an apple ablaze while it rested on her friend Mai's head. In a panic, Zuko rushed to assist, inadvertently causing both himself and Mai to tumble into a nearby fountain, much to the entertainment of Azula and Ty Lee. Just as Zuko was on the verge of leaving in frustration, Ursa returned with a letter from Iroh, who was commanding the siege of Ba Sing Se, the capital city of the Earth Kingdom at that time. Following Iroh's letter, Ursa gathered Zuko and Azula to read its contents aloud. Zuko was thrilled to learn of the unique dagger his uncle had sent him as a gift. In contrast, Azula showed little enthusiasm for her gift, instead pondering aloud the potential outcome of Iroh's fate in combat. This provoked Zuko's anger, leading him to confront his sister with a hypothetical scenario involving their cousin Lu Ten and their father's morality. Despite Zuko's passionate reaction, Azula remained unaffected. Several months later, during a family meal in the palace dining hall, Azula began to boast about challenging their firebending instructor, Kunio, dismissing his techniques as inferior. Agreeing with Azula's assessment, Ozai decided to exile Kunio to the colonies as punishment. When Zuko objected, defending Kunio's methods as legitimate, Ozai berated him for challenging his sister's authority on firebending. In a vulnerable moment, Zuko timidly admitted that Azula had mastered 14 more firebending forms than he. Ozai then cruelly recounted how he had once considered discarding Zuko at birth due to suspicions of him being a non-bender, further devastating his son by insinuating that Azula was inherently favored by fate, while Zuko was merely fortunate to have been born at all. Ursa's disappearance. At the age of 11, Zuko experienced the tragic death of his cousin, Lu Ten, in combat at Ba Sing Se. This loss led to General Iroh's abandonment of his 600-day siege of the Earth Kingdom capital, consumed by grief over the loss of his only child. During an audience with Fire Lord Azula, Ozai showcased Azula's exceptional firebending prowess and military acumen, which surpassed Zuko's abilities. Despite these displays, Azula remained unimpressed and demanded that Ursa and her children leave, urging Ozai to be forthright about his intentions for the audience. Unbeknownst to their parents, Azula and Zuko listened in on the conversation as Ozai expressed his desire to be named heir in Iroh's place. He argued that Iroh's prolonged grief and unpredictable behavior made his return from war uncertain, leaving no heir to continue his lineage. However, Azula reacted with fury, rejecting Ozai's proposal and declaring that Iroh had already suffered enough, while Ozai's trials were just beginning. Filled with fear, Zuko fled the scene while Azula remained to observe. Later, as he attempted to sleep in his room, Azula entered and cruelly taunted him with the claim that Azula's punishment for Ozai was to kill Zuko, intending to make him experience the pain of losing a firstborn child. Hearing the disturbance, Ursa intervened and escorted Azula away, insisting it was time for a conversation. Left alone, Zuko repeated to himself the mantra, "Azula always lies." Later, as he drifted back to sleep, he was roused by his mother's presence. In a tender moment, she assured him that all her actions were to safeguard him, and urged him to hold fast to his identity despite the upheavals. The following morning, he frantically searched for his mother, only to encounter Azula, who callously informed him of Azulan's passing and their mother's disappearance. To exacerbate his anguish, she toyed with his pearl dagger, a gift from Uncle Iroh, noting that their mother wasn't around to reclaim it from her. Eventually, he confronted Ozai in the palace gardens, demanding to know Ursa's whereabouts, but received no response, leaving him crestfallen. At Azulan's funeral, during which Ozai was declared the new Fire Lord at the apparent behest of the dying Azulan, Zuko was left to grapple with the uncertainty of his mother's fate. Banishment. 2 years later, General Iroh granted entry to a persistent 13-year-old Zuko into a war council alongside Ozai and several generals. Despite being instructed by his uncle to remain silent throughout the meeting, Zuko couldn't withhold his voice when General Bujing proposed sacrificing a division of new recruits as a diversionary tactic. Viewing this as a betrayal of the recruits' loyalties, Zuko opposed the plan. His defiance was perceived as a severe affront, leading Ozai to demand that Zuko engage in Agni Kai. Unaware that it was his father, not the offended general whom he had insulted, Zuko initially agreed to the challenge. However, his confidence wavered when he realized his opponent was none other than his own father. Instantly remorseful, Zuko dropped to his knees, refusing to fight, and tearfully pleaded for his father's forgiveness. Ozai dismissed his son's refusal as an act of cowardice and further disrespect, asserting that Zuko would learn respect through suffering. Inflicting permanent scars on the left side of Zuko's face, Ozai also stripped him of his rightful inheritance and banished him from the land he cherished. He decreed that Zuko's return would only be permitted upon capturing the long-lost Avatar, who had vanished a century ago. Despite the seemingly futile nature of the task, Zuko clung to it desperately as his sole chance to reclaim his honor and all that he had forfeited. At this juncture, Zuko remained steadfast in his belief that it was his duty and destiny as Ozai's eldest child to eventually ascend to the throne as Fire Lord. For the following 2 years, Zuko embarked on a futile and desperate quest at sea in search of the Avatar. He combed through the 4 air temples, commencing with the Western Air Temple, and scoured even the most remote corners of the world in pursuit of his elusive quarry. Accompanied by his uncle Iroh, Zuko endured the journey of exile aboard a modest vessel with a small crew. Despite not being royal guards or elite soldiers, they remained loyal to Iroh, possibly out of admiration for the esteemed general or due to their own banishment. Although discontent often simmered among them under Zuko's leadership, they begrudgingly followed his commands. Throughout the voyage, Iroh seemed to view the search as an extended vacation, much to Zuko's disdain. However, in truth, Iroh endeavored to mentor his nephew and facilitate his journey of self-discovery. However, everything would change when Zuko finally encountered the Avatar in the late months of 99 AG. Finding the Avatar. After 2.5 years of exile, Zuko's journey brought him to the Southern Water Tribe, located at the South Pole. One day, he observed a beam of bright light from his warship and excitedly informed his skeptical uncle Iroh that it indicated the Avatar's presence. To their surprise, Zuko's intuition proved correct, as Aang had just been freed from the iceberg. Determined to capture the Avatar, the banished prince ordered the ship to sail towards the source of the light. As the night progressed, Iroh urged Zuko to rest and cautioned him about the futility of his quest, noting that Zuko's father, grandfather, and great-grandfather had all attempted to capture the Avatar without success. In response, Zuko curtly remarked that their failures were attributed to their lack of personal stakes, unlike his pursuit driven by the restoration of honor. The following day, Iroh commenced Zuko's firebending education by instructing him in the basics, leading drills with Zuko and his fellow infantrymen. Despite his efforts, Zuko struggled to execute the sequence correctly. Following Iroh's lecture, emphasizing the importance of breath control over brute force and firebending, an impatient Zuko pressed his uncle to teach him more advanced techniques, arguing that defeating the Avatar required more than just the fundamentals. Reluctantly, Iroh agreed, but not before taking a moment to finish his meal of roast duck. Later, Zuko spotted a signal flare emanating from an old Fire Nation shipwreck, accidentally triggered by the Avatar. Observing Katara and Aang escaping the wreckage, Zuko observed their trajectory toward a nearby village. Urging his crew to rouse his uncle, Zuko informed them that he had finally located the Avatar and his hiding place. Face of the enemy. Arriving swiftly at Wolf Cove, Zuko disembarked from his ship, accompanied by a small contingent of soldiers. Upon his descent, Sokka rushed toward him, armed with primitive weaponry. However, Zuko, possessing superior combat skills, effortlessly countered Sokka's attacks with just his bare hands, displaying almost disdain for his opponent. Demanding the Avatar's whereabouts, Zuko expected to find an elderly individual among the villagers. He seized Kanna threateningly, prompting Sokka to launch another assault. Despite Sokka's efforts, Zuko easily nullified his attacks using only his hands. However, Sokka managed to land a fortunate blow when his boomerang struck the back of Zuko's helmet, eliciting anger from the prince, who threatened to unleash firebending upon the villagers. The confrontation took an unexpected turn when Avatar Aang arrived, riding an otter penguin, and swiftly knocked Zuko off his feet. Zuko was astonished to discover that the Avatar was merely a 12-year-old boy, rather than the venerable master he had anticipated. Expressing his shock, Zuko was met with similar astonishment from the Water Tribe villagers. Quickly regaining his composure, Zuko wasted no time in launching a barrage of fire blasts at Aang. Despite Aang's adept defense with airbending, he opted to cease the battle upon realizing that Zuko's attacks endangered the children he had befriended. Surrendering, Aang was taken into custody by Zuko's soldiers as they departed for the Fire Nation. Aboard Zuko's ship, the guards guided Aang to the prison hold, while Prince Zuko delegated the task of transporting the boy's glider to his personal quarters to his uncle. True to his typical behavior, Iroh promptly delegated the responsibility to the nearest guard. As Aang was escorted to the prison hold with his hands bound, he utilized his airbending abilities in an attempt to break free, prompting one of the guards to sound the alarm. Running through the maze of corridors aboard the ship, Aang explored numerous rooms until he finally stumbled upon Zuko's personal quarters. Rushing inside to retrieve his staff, he found himself confronted by Zuko, who promptly shut the door to prevent any chance of escape. Zuko unleashed a barrage of attacks in an attempt to subdue Aang, but the nimble airbender effortlessly dodged each strike. With a swift series of powerful gusts, Aang propelled Zuko against the walls and ceiling of the room, momentarily disorienting him. Heading outdoors, Aang readied himself to flee using his glider. However, just as he lifted off, Zuko sprang after him, seizing his ankle. Unable to manage the added weight or break free from Zuko's grasp, Aang struggled to stay airborne, and the two tumbled clumsily onto the deck below. As they prepared for another confrontation, their attention was diverted by the sudden arrival of Appa, who carried Sokka and Katara, coming to Aang's aid. Despite Aang's attempts to refocus, Zuko unleashed a barrage of fire blasts, driving him to the edge of the deck and knocking away his staff. Despite emerging seemingly unscathed unscathed from the flames, Aang had lost his balance and plunged overboard into the icy waters below. As Aang began to sink, he momentarily appeared unconscious, but soon his eyes flickered open and he entered the Avatar state. Harnessing the power of waterbending, he manipulated the sea around him, propelling himself into the air atop a swirling column of water. Witnessing this extraordinary demonstration of bending prowess, Zuko, Katara, and Sokka were taken aback. Aang then landed gracefully on the ship's deck, shaping the water beneath him into a spinning wall that sent Zuko and his guards flying, with Zuko himself tumbling overboard. Meanwhile, Appa descended onto the deck. Aang, seemingly disoriented after exerting such immense power, collapsed. Rushing to his side, Katara and Sokka ensured he was unharmed before preparing to depart. Sokka hurried to retrieve Aang's staff, only to encounter Zuko resurfacing on the deck. Seizing the opportunity presented by Zuko's vulnerable position, Sokka swiftly delivered a series of blows to the prince's forehead, causing him to topple overboard once again. Desperately clinging to an anchor's chain halfway down the ship's hull, Zuko struggled to regain his footing. Meanwhile, some of the soldiers regrouped and advanced towards Katara and the still recovering Aang. Katara managed to immobilize the guards by freezing them in place, halting their approach. With the situation under control, the trio swiftly mounted Appa and prepared to depart. Just as they were about to leave, Iroh arrived on the scene and aided Zuko back onto the deck. Together, they unleashed a combined fire blast in a bid to intercept the escaping Sky Bison. However, Aang, now recovered from his daze, intervened just in time, redirecting the fireball with a powerful gust of wind. The redirected blast struck one of the massive ice walls flanking the ship, triggering an avalanche that buried the ship's front half under a thick layer of ice and snow, bringing it to an abrupt halt. As Appa soared into the distance, Zuko could only watch helplessly from the frozen ship's deck. Pirate troubles. Enraged by the Avatar's escape, Zuko directed his crew to extricate the ship from the ice and pursue Aang and his companions without delay. Determined to never underestimate Aang again, he vowed to capture him at all costs. Leading a relentless pursuit, Zuko pushed his damaged ship to its limits, disregarding his crew's apprehensions. As the ship's engine finally gave out in the South Sea, Zuko made the decision to make landfall on a nearby island in search of supplies for makeshift repairs. Confident in his ability to handle any potential threats, he opted to venture into the island's interior alone, leaving Iroh and the remaining crew behind to safeguard the ship. During his journey, Zuko encountered a solitary individual who claimed to be a merchant. Despite harboring suspicions about the stranger, Zuko decided to accompany him to his camp. Along the way, they encountered wild platypus bears that Zuko had to fend off. Upon reaching the merchant's camp, the man confessed his true identity as a pirate who had intended to ambush members of the Fire Nation. He then ordered his cohorts to seize Zuko for ransom. Unperturbed by this revelation, Zuko prepared to defend himself, only to be surprised when Iroh and several other members of his crew emerged from the surrounding woods. Concerned for his nephew's safety, Iroh and the others had secretly followed him. United, the Fire Nation contingent effortlessly vanquished the pirates, seizing the camp's provisions for themselves. However, any sense of relief Zuko felt was short-lived as he heard the distant sounds of explosions emanating from his ship. Realizing that their vessel was under attack by another group of pirates, Zuko angrily questioned Iroh about the adequacy of their defenses. Hurrying to the ship, the group encountered more obstacles in the form of platypus bears and hostile pirates. Despite these challenges, they managed to regain control of their ship after a fierce battle. With the pirates defeated, the crew began the necessary repairs to ensure their departure from the island to the Earth Kingdom mainland. Their journey, however, was not without further peril, as they encountered another assault by pirates before reaching the next Fire Nation military base. Engaging in a heated confrontation, they successfully thwarted the pirates' advances, allowing them to resume their voyage. A bitter rivalry. Shortly thereafter, Zuko arrived at Ketu Harbor, a naval base under Fire Nation control located off the southwest coast of the Earth Kingdom. His ship was in dire need of extensive repairs following the encounter with Aang. Anxious to resume their pursuit of the Avatar, Zuko urged for swift repairs and cautioned Iroh against mentioning their mission to anyone to avoid drawing unwanted attention from other firebenders. Approaching them, Zhao greeted Iroh and Zuko, informing them of his recent promotion to commander. Surveying the damage to their vessel, Zhao inquired about the cause. Zuko fabricated a story, claiming that their ship had collided with an Earth Kingdom vessel. Intrigued, Zhao invited them for a drink, a proposition Zuko initially attempted to decline. However, Iroh intervened and accepted on behalf of both of them, leaving Zuko reluctantly obliged to join. Over tea in his tent, Commander Zhao outlined the Fire Nation's strategy for victory to Zuko and Iroh, with Zuko expressing skepticism about its effectiveness. Curious about Zuko's pursuit of the Avatar, Zhao questioned him, receiving a response indicating Zuko's lack of success. Despite expecting this, Zhao remained suspicious, believing Zuko was concealing something. He pressed Zuko for the truth, leading to a confrontation that ended with Zuko attempting to leave, but being restrained by Zhao's guards. After interrogating the ship's crew, Zhao's guards uncovered information revealing that Zuko had indeed encountered the Avatar, though the encounter had resulted in the Avatar's escape. Faced with this revelation, Zuko was compelled to divulge the truth to Zhao. Zhao expressed shock and disdain that a 12-year-old boy had managed to outwit Zuko and his crew. Undeterred, Zhao declared the determination to continue his pursuit of the Avatar without underestimating him again. When Zhao announced his intention to take over the hunt for the Avatar, Zuko flew into a rage, attempting to lunge at Zhao but being restrained by his guards. Ordered to remain in Zhao's tent, Zuko vented his frustration by kicking a table, causing Iroh's tea to spill. As Zhao and his search party prepared to depart in search of the Avatar, he promised to release Zuko and Iroh once they were at sea. Despite Zhao's mockery and assurance of his superior resources, Zuko asserted his determination to capture the Avatar before Zhao. Dismissing Zuko's resolve, Zhao belittled him by questioning his worth in his father's eyes, claiming that Fire Lord Ozai saw nothing but failure in his son. Incensed by Zhao's insults, Zuko impulsively challenged him to an Agni Kai at sunset. After Zhao departed, Iroh cautioned Zuko about the consequences of his previous duel with a firebending master, but Zuko remained resolute. Recognizing his nephew's determination, Iroh offered guidance and instructed Zuko to meditate in preparation for the duel, despite Zuko's initial skepticism. Ultimately, Zuko acknowledged the wisdom of his uncle's counsel and embraced his advice. As the sun began to set, Commander Zhao and Prince Zuko positioned themselves at opposite ends of the courtyard, ready to engage in their duel. Despite Iroh's counsel to rely on his fundamentals, Zuko appeared determined to rely solely on his determination, stating confidently that he would not be defeated, assuming his stance. In response, Zhao expressed his confidence that the duel would swiftly conclude and assumed his own stance. The intensity of their gazes matched the tension in the air as the gong signaled the start of the match. Zhao demonstrated superior skills, effortlessly evading and neutralizing Zuko's fire blasts. Despite Iroh's continued reminders to stick to the basics, Zuko struggled to gain an upper hand. Zhao countered with his own barrage of fire blasts, gradually pushing Zuko backward with each block. In a final powerful blast using both hands, Zhao knocked Zuko to the ground. Seizing the opportunity, Zhao leaped forward, readying a devastating fire blast aimed directly at Zuko's face, intent on ending the duel decisively. Just as Zhao's fire blast was about to make contact, Zuko swiftly rolled out of harm's way and sprang back up with a flourish, disrupting Zhao's stance. With renewed determination, Zuko launched a barrage of swift attacks, driving Zhao on the defensive and ultimately incapacitating him with a powerful fire blast from a full-body kick. Instead of delivering a final blow, Zuko warned Zhao not to stand in his way again, releasing a fire blast past Zhao's face as a warning. As Zuko began to walk away, Zhao, consumed by fury at his defeat, unleashed another fire blast at Zuko's back, only to have it intercepted by Iroh's bare hand. After subduing Zhao, Iroh prevented Zuko from retaliating and rebuked the commander for his dishonorable behavior, emphasizing Zuko's superior honor even in exile. Despite this, Iroh thanked Zhao for the tea they had shared. As they left the arena, Zuko questioned Iroh about his sincerity, to which Iroh responded affirmatively, mentioning his fondness for ginseng tea. Walking back to the ship, a faint smile graced Prince Zuko's lips. Following the trail, while Zuko's ship, now repaired at Ketu Harbor, floated aimlessly at sea, Zuko was deep in meditation. Interrupting his nephew's concentration, Iroh entered with news concerning the Avatar, urging Zuko to remain calm. Despite Zuko's assurance that he could control his temper, Iroh admitted to having no precise information on the Avatar's current whereabouts, much to Zuko's frustration. However, Iroh revealed that there had been numerous sightings of Aang, albeit with no way to track him effectively. Presenting a detailed map of these sightings, Iroh highlighted Aang's elusive nature, prompting Zuko to assert confidently that Aang was skilled in evasive tactics. Meanwhile, Team Avatar made their way to Kyoshi Island, a tranquil community untouched by the ravages of war. As word of the Avatar's presence spread rapidly throughout the island, Zuko and Iroh received the news. Surprised by the sudden development, Zuko hastily prepared to depart for Kyoshi Island, ensuring to grab his lunch from Iroh, asserting that he intended to save it for later. Upon the ship's arrival at Koi Bay, Zuko received a cautionary warning from his uncle about the neutral stance of the locals in the war, implying the potential presence of unknown defensive capabilities. Disregarding these concerns, Zuko confidently asserted that the island's fishing villages posed no significant threat. Undeterred, he initiated the raid, leading his troops mounted on Komodo rhinos into the heart of the island. Their advance was abruptly halted when they encountered a surprise ambush by a small group of Kyoshi warriors, before reaching the nearby village. Although the Fire Nation forces managed to repel the attack, the Kyoshi warriors skillfully evaded capture, further fueling Zuko's frustration. Determined to press on, Zuko urged his group to continue their march toward the village. Before long, the group entered the town in their search for the Avatar, only to be ambushed once again by the Kyoshi warriors. Despite being outnumbered, the Kyoshi warriors demonstrated remarkable abilities and combat skills, incapacitating many firebenders. However, Zuko showcased his prowess by defeating 3 Kyoshi warriors simultaneously, including their leader, Suki, and Sokka, who had recently received training from her. Following his victory, Zuko loudly called out for the Avatar. Spotting Aang, they engaged in a brief skirmish, culminating in Aang's victory as he slammed Zuko into a nearby house with a powerful air blast. With Zuko incapacitated, Aang made his escape aboard his flying bison. As the flames consumed the town, Zuko and his men prepared to chase after the Avatar once more. Suddenly, the Avatar leaped from his flying bison into the waters of Kyoshi. Shortly afterward, Aang emerged riding on the back of the Unagi, a colossal water-spouting eel, gripping onto its whiskers. With determination, Aang steered the Unagi towards the blazing village. The Unagi unleashed a powerful torrent of water, dousing the flames and saving the town. Aang then soared into the sky where he was retrieved by Appa along with Katara and Sokka. The sudden downpour soaked Zuko and his troops, leaving them disheartened and embarrassed, but Zuko remained resolute to continue his pursuit. Later, Zuko arrived at a Fire Nation prison rig following an earthbending prisoner outbreak. Amidst the wreckage, he discovered a Water Tribe necklace, indicating the presence of Katara, the Avatar's Water Tribe companion. Before departing, Zuko aided the prison rig's warden in restoring order and resuming its industrial operations. Rescuing Uncle. After some time, while the Avatar confronted Heibai, a forest spirit plaguing Senlin village, Iroh relaxed in a heated pool of water transformed into a personal jacuzzi using firebending. Zuko grew increasingly impatient, urging his uncle to prepare for departure. Although Iroh agreed, he was unclothed, prompting Zuko to shield his eyes and grant his uncle a few more minutes to get dressed. Warning Iroh that he would depart without him if he was not ready in 30 minutes, Zuko left him to his leisure. Returning later with 2 soldiers, Zuko discovered what one of the soldiers identified as a landslide. Upon closer inspection, Zuko observed that the rocks had been displaced uphill, leading him to realize that his uncle had been captured by earthbenders. Determined, Zuko set off in pursuit, riding atop his Komodo rhino. The morning after his search, Zuko stumbled upon a sandal bearing Iroh's unmistakable stench, confirming its owner. Following the earthbender's trail, Zuko caught sight of the Avatar's bison. Although tempted to pursue, he ultimately chose to prioritize rescuing his uncle. Later, as Earth Kingdom soldiers prepared to punish Iroh for attempting to escape by crushing his hands, Zuko intervened just in time. With a swift kick, he deflected the rock intended to harm Iroh and then effortlessly broke the chains restraining him. Impressed, Iroh acknowledged Zuko's skill, to which Zuko credited his uncle's teachings. Despite being outnumbered, they swiftly dispatched their adversaries, demonstrating their superior prowess. Following the skirmish, Zuko urged Iroh to dress appropriately. The solstice, a dangerous move. At Senlin village, just before dawn on the winter solstice, Prince Zuko forcefully approached a villager's house, demanding information about the Avatar's whereabouts. Learning that the Avatar and his companions were heading to Avatar Roku's temple in the Fire Nation after resolving a conflict with Heibai, Zuko set off to pursue them across the ocean. On Zuko's vessel, Iroh cautioned his nephew about the consequences of entering Fire Nation waters, emphasizing that he risked arrest due to his banishment. Zuko countered that his pursuit of the Avatar would be understood by his father, Fire Lord Ozai, but Iroh cautioned against expecting understanding from him. Despite nearing Aang and his friends, Zuko fired his catapult, and Aang narrowly avoided the attack with Appa's agility. Spotting a blockade of Fire Nation ships ahead, Zuko ordered a reload, ignoring Iroh's suggestion to retreat as they were still in Earth Kingdom territory. Determined to continue his pursuit, Zuko pressed forward against Iroh's advice. As expected, Commander Zhao led the blockade and directed his ships to unleash their firepower on the Avatar. Upon receiving reports of a Fire Nation vessel in the vicinity, Zhao initially dismissed it, but changed his stance upon realizing it belonged to Zuko. Labeling it as belonging to a traitor, Zhao persisted with the attack on the Avatar, indifferent to the potential damage to Zuko's ship. Despite Appa managing to evade most of the initial barrage, one shot struck Zuko's vessel, causing it to emit heavy smoke from the rear. Although advised by one of his men to halt for repairs due to engine damage, Zuko remained resolute and ordered the ship to press on. After Aang successfully navigated through the blockade's onslaught, Commander Zhao, frustrated yet determined to pursue, observed Zuko's ship approaching. Rather than apprehending him, Zhao permitted Zuko to pass through the blockade unimpeded, recognizing an opportunity to track Zuko and thereby locate the Avatar. Confused by Zhao's decision, Zuko sought an explanation from Iroh, who suggested that Zhao intended to exploit Zuko's pursuit of the Avatar for his own gain. Contemplating his uncle's insight, Zuko found himself uncertain of his next course of action. Eventually, he formulated a plan, exploiting the cover provided by the smoke billowing from his damaged ship, Zuko proposed using a smaller vessel to evade Zhao's pursuit, while the commander continued trailing his primary ship. Believing he had outsmarted Zhao, Zuko arrived at Crescent Island and clandestinely infiltrated the Crescent Island Fire Temple. Deceiving the Fire Sages into unlocking the door with their firebending, each sage was then subdued by Shu, Katara, Sokka, and Momo. Katara urgently called for Aang to enter the chamber, but there was no response. Suddenly emerging from behind a pillar, Zuko revealed himself, holding Aang captive. Caught off guard, Team Avatar and Shu lost their hold over the sages, who were now restrained by them. Ordering the sages to seal the door immediately, Zuko began to drag Aang away from it, heading down the stairs. However, the Avatar managed to break free and shoved Zuko down the stairs before darting through the door. Though the sages attempted to intervene, Aang succeeded in entering the chamber before the doors shut, illuminating the room with a bright light that gradually faded. Outside the chamber doors, Zuko questioned Shu about his decision to aid Aang. The Fire Sage responded that it had been the Fire Sage's historical duty to assist the Avatar, and asserted that it remained so. Before they could delve further into the conversation, Zhao and his soldiers appeared, promptly placing Zuko under arrest and declaring their intent to apprehend the Avatar upon his exit. As the Avatar spirit manifested within, Zhao and his troops poised themselves to strike at Aang as soon as he emerged from the chamber. When the door finally opened with a burst of light, they launched their attack at the figure within. However, their target was not the young Avatar, but the spirit of the previous Avatar, Roku. With formidable power, Roku redirected their fire assault, sending them reeling backward. Amidst the chaos, the intense heat from the flames melted the restraints binding Katara and the others, allowing them to break free. Seizing the opportunity, Zuko made a dash back to his boat, managing to escape aboard his smaller vessel while watching the Avatar soar away. Pirates and a waterbending scroll. While engaged in a sparring session with Lieutenant G, Zuko received word from Iroh that the ship was being redirected to a port. Iroh explained that he needed to find a replacement White Lotus tile for his Pai Sho game. Zuko, visibly irritated and emitting smoke through his nostrils, begrudgingly agreed to the detour. With a calm demeanor, Iroh remarked on the value of having an understanding nephew, just as smoke filled the bridge. Upon reaching the port, Iroh's search for the replacement tile proved fruitless, much to Zuko's frustration. However, Iroh did manage to find various trinkets for the upcoming music night on the ship, which 3 of the soldiers were tasked with carrying. Despite this, Zuko lamented that the entire trip had been a waste of time. On his way back to the ship, Zuko encountered a group of pirates who were in pursuit of Aang as they sought to reclaim a waterbending scroll stolen by Katara. Recognizing their common goal, Zuko decided to collaborate with the pirates to track down Aang. While the pirate captain presumed that Aang would be hiding in the forest, Zuko correctly speculated that he and his companions would be practicing waterbending near the river. Late at night, they discovered Katara practicing waterbending alone by the river. Zuko swiftly apprehended her and secured her to a tree, intending to extract information about Aang's whereabouts. To persuade her, he revealed that he possessed her mother's lost betrothal necklace, a sentimental memento for Katara. Despite his efforts, the pirates were solely interested in retrieving the scroll. In response, Zuko threatened to destroy the scroll if they failed to locate Aang. The following morning, Aang and Sokka were captured, and they stumbled upon Katara bound to a tree surrounded by firebenders. As Zuko and the pirates prepared to exchange Aang for the scroll, Sokka intervened, revealing Aang's identity as the Avatar. Despite Zuko's attempts to dissuade them, the pirates succumbed to greed and decided to capture the Avatar for themselves, triggering a confrontation. Amidst the chaos, Aang, Katara, and Sokka managed to escape while Zuko and the pirates clashed. Using waterbending, Katara and Aang propelled the pirates' boat into the water, enabling their getaway. Meanwhile, Iroh intervened to stop Zuko and the pirate captain, pointing out that their boat was getting stolen. Initially amused, Zuko's mood soured when he realized the pirates had commandeered his smaller vessel, taunting him as they set off in pursuit of the Avatar. After both ships plummeted over a waterfall, Iroh realized that his missing White Lotus tile had been tucked into his sleeve all along. Zuko, seething with frustration, snatched the tile from Iroh's grasp and hurled it over the waterfall in a fit of rage. To his surprise, the tile struck one of the pirates on the head before bouncing off. In the storm, as Zuko steered his ship on a seemingly tranquil day, Iroh warned of an impending storm, urging Zuko to change course. Rejecting the advice, Zuko asserted their commitment to pursuing the Avatar wherever he went. Despite the signs of an approaching storm, Zuko persisted in his course, prompting Lieutenant G to challenge his decision. Ignoring the objections, Zuko attempted to provoke a duel with G, but Iroh intervened before any conflict could escalate. While Iroh narrated Zuko's backstory to the crew, the ship was battered by the raging storm. A bolt of lightning narrowly missed them, but Iroh deftly redirected it away. Zuko spotted the helmsman perilously dangling from the mast and swiftly ascended to his aid, pulling him to safety. Reluctantly, Zuko resolved to steer the ship to calmer waters, eventually navigating to the eye of the storm. Amidst the tempest, he saw sight of Aang soaring through the eye, but chose not to engage, allowing him to pass undisturbed. The Blue Spirit, the new Admiral Zhao. At Po Huai Stronghold, a Fire Nation stronghold commanding the Earth Kingdom's western coast, Commander Zhao appealed for the assistance of the Yuyan Archers, an elite unit renowned for their archery skills, in his quest to capture the Avatar. Initially denied, the situation swiftly abrupted when word arrived from Fire Lord Ozai promoting Zhao to the rank of Admiral. With newfound authority, Zhao arrogantly transformed his request for the Yuyan Archers into a direct order. Meanwhile, an observer concealed by a blue theater mask resembling the Dark Water Spirit from the Love Amongst the Dragons play silently observed the scene from a vantage point far above and behind Zhao. Meanwhile, aboard Zuko's ship, the Banished Prince convened with his crew to strategize their next steps in pursuing the Avatar, their search hampered by the recent storm. Their deliberations were abruptly halted by the arrival of a sizable Fire Nation vessel, part of Admiral Zhao's fleet, which drew alongside theirs. Fire Nation troops boarded, presenting a wanted poster of Aang and declaring that all information concerning the Avatar was to be conveyed directly to Admiral Zhao. Zuko, incensed by the intrusion, declared he had no information to offer, and demanded the soldiers vacate his ship to allow them passage. However, his anger intensified when the soldiers complied with the first demand, but revealed that under Zhao's directives, no vessels were permitted to enter or exit the area. Meanwhile, Iroh maintained his usual calm demeanor, engrossed in a game of Pai Sho with some crew members, seemingly unfazed by the commotion. Zuko practiced his bending on the ship's deck, his mind preoccupied and his authority seemingly abandoned since the arrival of the Fire Nation soldiers. Concerned, Iroh approached his nephew, offering reassurance that there was still hope to capture the Avatar before Zhao. Zuko, however, expressed doubt, citing Zhao's vast resources and authority. He lamented the possibility of losing everything he had fought for since his exile. His worst fears materialized when the Yuyan Archers successfully captured the Avatar. The young airbender was brought as a prisoner to Po Huai Stronghold, where he was chained and confined to a cell. There, Admiral Zhao subjected him to ridicule and mockery, infiltration and escape. The mysterious figure known as the Blue Spirit reappeared among the bushes lining the path leading to the fortress. Quietly, the Blue Spirit infiltrated the stronghold by hitching a ride underneath a carriage, then skillfully navigated its corridors to reach Aang's cell. Fortuitously, Admiral Zhao was occupied addressing the Fire Nation troops within the fortress, announcing the Avatar's capture and boasting of imminent victory in the war. This provided a distraction for the Blue Spirit to scale the innermost wall undetected, eventually accessing a sewage system that led to the main tower. Dispatching guards with precision, the Blue Spirit approached Aang's cell, drawing his swords. Aang, initially alarmed, feared the Blue Spirit's intentions, uncertain whether the masked figure was friend or foe. However, Aang's apprehensions quickly dissolved as the Blue Spirit swiftly sliced through his bindings, signaling for him to follow. Though Aang sought answers about the Blue Spirit's identity and motives, the enigmatic figure remained silent, prompting Aang to interpret his actions as an invitation to escape. Trusting his instincts, Aang trailed the Blue Spirit out of the room. Exiting the tower through the fortress's subterranean passages, Aang and the Blue Spirit stealthily navigated the sewers. Meanwhile, Zhao confidently strode through the fortress, boasting of his victory to his secretary. His triumph turned to concern upon discovering the incapacitated guards and learning of Aang's escape, prompting him to raise the alarm. As the alarm blared, Aang and the Blue Spirit ascended the rope that the latter had used to descend the fortress wall. However, their escape was abruptly halted when the rope was severed, forcing them into combat with the fortress guards at each of its 3 gates. Aang swiftly dispatched a group of soldiers using his airbending, easily reaching the first gate. Meanwhile, the Blue Spirit engaged in a fierce battle with a group of armed soldiers, holding his own despite being outnumbered. Concerned for his mysterious ally, Aang rushed to the aid of the Blue Spirit, who was adeptly handling his opponents. In the heat of battle, Aang seized a spear and repurposed it into a makeshift staff, using it alongside his airbending to propel themselves to the top of the second wall. However, during their ascent, Aang lost his makeshift staff, leaving them with one final obstacle. Despite facing an onslaught of soldiers climbing the wall with bamboo ladders, Aang ingeniously repurposed the ladders into stilts, allowing them to traverse the third wall. With the Blue Spirit clinging to his back, they successfully crossed to the other side. However, just as they approached the final wall, a firebender destroyed the ladder beneath them, forcing Aang and the Blue Spirit to jump. Despite their efforts to grab onto the wall, they ultimately fell to the ground below. As they landed, a group of firebenders launched an assault, prompting Aang to defend them with his airbending. Upon hearing Zhao's command to capture the Avatar alive, the Blue Spirit reacted swiftly, pressing his sword against Aang's throat in a menacing gesture. Recognizing the threat, Zhao reluctantly ordered his soldiers to stand down, emphasizing the importance of capturing the Avatar unharmed. Sensing an opportunity, the Blue Spirit capitalized on the situation by using Aang as leverage to secure their escape. With his sword still poised at Aang's neck, They were escorted out of the fortress without turning their backs to their captors. Despite confusion among the guards, Zhao remained composed, unwilling to take any unnecessary risks. Atop the outer wall, Zhao commanded a Yuyan archer to incapacitate the blue spirit, who swiftly complied, shooting a single arrow that struck the mask-wearing figure in the forehead, rendering him unconscious. Protected by his mask, the blue spirit collapsed, his identity still concealed. Seizing the opportunity, Aang conjured a large dust cloud to obscure their escape as Fire Nation soldiers rushed from the fortress in pursuit. Taking advantage of the chaos, Aang removed the blue spirit's mask, revealing to his astonishment that his rescuer was none other than Zuko. Startled, Aang initially attempted to flee, but hesitated before disappearing into the dust. When the dust settled, both Aang and Zuko vanished without a trace. Zhao, furious at their escape, was further incensed when one of Aang's frogs from earlier reappeared, taunted him, and leapt from the wall, exacerbating his frustration. Upon regaining consciousness, Zuko found himself in a wooded area with Aang as the morning light filtered through the trees. Aang reminisced about his Fire Nation friend Kuzan and the mischievous adventures they shared. Reflecting on their conversation, Aang asked Zuko if under different circumstances they could have been friends. Zuko's response came in the form of a fire blast, narrowly missing Aang as he darted away through the foliage. Observing Zuko's softened expression, Aang fled deeper into the woods, and Zuko made no move to pursue him, at least for the time being. Returning to his ship, Zuko encountered Iroh's inquiries about his whereabouts during the night, though the elder man seemed more preoccupied with the previous evening's music night events. Brushing off Iroh's concerns, Zuko retreated to his quarters, ordering no disturbances as he sought to catch up on his rest. Following the incidents at Pohai's stronghold, Zuko would sporadically adopt the guise of the Blue Spirit. His enigmatic actions often led onlookers to perceive him as otherworldly, fueling speculation that he might be a spirit or ghost, thus perpetuating the legend of the Blue Spirit. Despite skeptics emerging, dismissing the Blue Spirit as mere folklore, the Fire Nation military regarded him as a significant menace and issued a bounty for his capture. The Bounty Hunter. In his ongoing effort to soothe Zuko's combative temperament, Iroh sat down with his nephew over a cup of tea, asserting its benefits for mental well-being. Just as Zuko was about to try a sip, there was a disturbance on deck, prompting Zuko and Iroh to go check it out. There they encountered the bounty hunter June and her Shirshu invading his ship, claiming to be in pursuit of a stowaway. Despite Zuko's denial of any stowaways, the Shirshu unearthed the hidden individual from the cargo and incapacitated him with its venomous tongue. Zuko was left amazed and queried June on how she managed to locate the man with such ease. June explained that her Shirshu possessed an extraordinary ability to detect scents from miles away, merely by sniffing an object. With her prize secured, June departed from the scene, leaving Zuko and an intrigued Iroh to ponder over the unexpected encounter. Zuko, recognizing an opportunity to locate the Avatar, enlisted Iroh's assistance and trailed June to a rundown tavern to seek her aid. Initially, he demanded her help as compensation for the damage inflicted upon his ship, but June only agreed after Iroh offered to pay her in gold. Despite Iroh's flirtatious banter with June and her jests about his girlfriend, Zuko remained focused and presented Katara's necklace as a means to track her scent, thus indirectly tracing Aang's whereabouts. Following Katara's scent trail led them through the ruins of Taku and Makapu village until they reached Katara and Sokka. After incapacitating them, they discovered that Aang was not among them. Using a map held by one of them, the Shirshu pinpointed Aang's scent, leading them to track him to the Abbey. In a one-on-one confrontation, Zuko faced off against Aang while June and the Shirshu engaged Appa. Amidst the chaos, everyone battled fiercely, with Zuko relentlessly pursuing Aang throughout the Abbey, launching fiery assaults while Aang defended himself with airbending. As Sokka, now recovered from the paralysis due to the nun's remedy, devised a plan to thwart the Shirshu's senses by overwhelming its sense of smell with perfume, Katara skillfully waterbent the perfume onto the Shirshu, causing it to lose control. In its panicked state, the Shirshu inadvertently paralyzed both Zuko and June. Iroh feigned paralysis as well, using the opportunity to draw June close to him, much to Zuko's chagrin when he noticed. Siege of the North. At a Fire Nation bay near the Northern Water Tribe's location, Zuko's ship had anchored for the night. While the crew enjoyed Iroh's music night, Zhao arrived on board to recruit sailors for his impending mission on the Northern Water Tribe. Alerted by Iroh, Zuko confronted Zhao in his quarters upon learning of the recruitment plan. Despite Zuko's attempt to attack Zhao, Iroh intervened and prevented any violence. As Zhao noticed the broadswords displayed on the mantelpiece, he subtly hinted at Zuko's possible connection to the Blue Spirit by inquiring about his proficiency with swords. Zuko, aware of Zhao's suspicions, dismissed the swords as mere decorative antiques. After the crew departed, Zuko nursed his bitterness and resentment alone in his quarters, refusing Iroh's suggestion of a walk and opting instead to wallow in his feelings. Suspecting Zuko's deception, Zhao clandestinely employed the same pirate crew Zuko had encountered previously to eliminate him. Despite successfully planting explosives aboard the ship, one of the pirates inadvertently made a noise, alerting Zuko to the danger. Investigating the disturbance, Zuko discovered the pirate captain's iguana parrot, secret, leading him to discover the planted explosives just before they detonated, causing the destruction of his vessel. Miraculously, Zuko shielded himself with a wall of fire moments before the explosion, saving his life. Reuniting with Iroh, Zuko secretly boarded Zhao's ship while his uncle accepted an offer to serve as the Admiral's advisor. Disguised as a soldier, Zuko remained aboard Zhao's ship throughout the siege, plotting to infiltrate the capital city of Agna-Kella under cover of night to capture Aang. Before embarking on his mission, he had a heartfelt conversation with Iroh, who offered him guidance and expressed his paternal affection, reminding Zuko of his late son. Affirming his understanding, Zuko vowed to reunite with Iroh after capturing the Avatar. With his uncle's blessing, he departed. Navigating through the waters, Zuko observed a group of turtle seals diving into a concealed opening, deducing it as their air source. Following suit, he submerged himself and eventually found himself trapped beneath the ice. Utilizing his firebending abilities, he melted the ice barrier and emerged within the city. Making his way to the Spirit Oasis, Zuko discovered that Aang had entered the spirit world. Confronting them, he demanded Aang's surrender. As Katara moved to protect him and Yue fled, Zuko assumed a defensive stance, preparing for a confrontation. Engaged in combat, Zuko and Katara initially seemed evenly matched, but Katara, fueled by the power of the moon, gained the advantage and encased Zuko in ice. However, with the sunrise, Zuko capitalized on his firebending abilities, breaking free from his icy prison and incapacitating Katara by hurling her into a nearby tree. Seizing Aang, Zuko departed from the city, journeying northward into a fierce blizzard. Navigating through the relentless snowfall, Zuko eventually discovered refuge within a cave, where he sought shelter. As Aang's spirit returned to his body, the Avatar awakened, attempting to flee but was swiftly subdued by Zuko. However, their encounter was interrupted by the arrival of Katara, Sokka, and Yue, who descended upon Appa. Katara overpowered Zuko, and they prepared to depart with Aang. Despite their victory, Aang insisted on sparing Zuko's life, advocating for his inclusion instead of leaving him vulnerable in the snow. Upon their return to Agna-Kella, Zuko managed to escape amidst the chaos of Zhao's assault on the moon spirit Tui, diverting their attention. Zuko pursued Zhao as the latter attempted to flee, engaging him in combat. Despite Zhao's accusations of betrayal and recognition of Zuko as the blue spirit, they fought on equal ground. Notably, Zuko's skills had significantly advanced since their Agni Kai, enabling him to effortlessly counter Zhao's every move. Gradually gaining the advantage, Zuko emerged victorious. As La, the ocean spirit, emerged from the water seeking vengeance for Tui's death, Zuko witnessed Zhao's futile struggle against the spirit's wrath. Despite extending his hand to offer assistance, Zhao refused and met his fate at the hands of the vengeful spirit. Subsequently, Zuko and Iroh fled the North Pole, embarking on a journey aboard a makeshift raft crafted from driftwood, enduring a 3-week voyage until they reached land. Betrayed. Upon reaching a Fire Nation village resort, Iroh indulged in a relaxing massage, while Zuko brooded over the 3-year mark of his banishment. He voiced his fervent desire to capture the Avatar and reclaim his honor, the throne, and his father's approval. Despite Iroh's attempt to console him with the notion that his banishment implied a form of caring from Ozai, Zuko remained disheartened. Upon their return, they encountered Azula, whose icy reception and taunting remarks, including the nickname Zuzu, further exacerbated Zuko's frustration. Azula conveyed Ozai's intentions to fortify his inner circle with trusted family members due to rumors of a potential coup. She claimed that their father regretted Zuko's exile and desired his return, a revelation that thrilled Zuko but left Iroh skeptical. While Zuko eagerly embraced the prospect of reconciliation, Iroh harbored doubts about Ozai's sincerity. This disagreement led to a heated exchange between Zuko and Iroh, with Zuko accusing Iroh of jealousy and selfishness before storming off in anger. The following morning, Zuko made his way to meet Azula alone, only to be joined unexpectedly by Iroh, who had decided to accompany him despite his lingering suspicions. Upon arriving at the harbor where Azula's ship awaited, they were greeted warmly by Azula, but her true intentions became apparent when her ship's captain referred to them as prisoners. In a moment of realization, Iroh swiftly sprang into action, engaging Azula's guards in combat. Zuko, reacting quickly, threw the captain overboard and confronted his sister for deceiving him. Azula remained unfazed, sneering in response as 2 of her guards attacked Zuko. He easily dispatched them before facing off against Azula, wielding fire daggers against her hand-to-hand combat skills. As the confrontation escalated, Azula gained the advantage and blasted Zuko away with a powerful fire attack, preparing to deliver a finishing blow with lightning. However, Iroh intervened, redirecting the lightning, knocking Azula overboard and facilitating their escape. Fleeing into the forest, they found refuge by a stream where Zuko symbolically severed ties with his family and the Fire Nation by cutting off his top knot with the dagger Iroh had given him years before. In a gesture of solidarity, he then passed the dagger to his uncle, who followed suit. agreement. With their ties severed, the pair fled into the countryside as fugitives. Struggling to survive in the wilderness, Iroh inadvertently consumed a toxic plant, prompting them to seek assistance from a young Earth Kingdom herbalist named Song. Despite Song's repeated attempts to connect with Zuko, he remained distant and cold. However, when she revealed her own scars inflicted by the Fire Nation, Zuko appeared visibly affected and somber. When asked about his father's involvement in the 100-Year War, Zuko simply acknowledged, yes, he is. Despite Song's kindness, Zuko departed with Iroh, leaving behind the stolen ostrich horse. As their desperation grew, Zuko became increasingly frustrated, particularly as Iroh resorted to begging for money. Witnessing Iroh facing harassment from locals, Zuko once again adopted the persona of the Blue Spirit, resorting to theft from merchants. Concerned for Zuko's well-being and honor, Iroh confronted him about his dubious actions and urged him to reconsider. When Iroh suggested that capturing the Avatar might not rectify their situation or restore Zuko's status in the Fire Nation, Zuko withdrew emotionally and walked away. Upon his return, he announced his decision to part ways with Iroh, believing that their journey together no longer served any purpose. Alone, Zuko roamed through the desolate landscapes of the Earth Kingdom, facing increasing hunger and deprivation. Despite his desperate circumstances, he refrained from stealing from a young pregnant couple he encountered along the way. Eventually, he stumbled upon a small village besieged by a group of corrupt Earth Kingdom soldiers. Displaying courage, Zuko confronted the soldiers, earning the admiration of a young boy named Lee, who invited Zuko to seek refuge at his family's farm. Gratefully accepting Lee's hospitality, Zuko spent the day assisting with farm chores while reflecting on his troubled past. Acting as a surrogate older brother to Lee, whose own sibling was away fighting in the war, Zuko even imparted a brief lesson on wielding dual broadswords when Lee expressed curiosity. As Zuko prepared to depart, news arrived that Lee's brother's battalion had been captured, prompting Lee's father to enlist in the army to rescue his son. Although urged by Lee to stay and provide support, Zuko declined, but not before entrusting Lee with a dagger given to him by Iroh. Following his departure from the village, Lee's mother, Sella, approached Zuko with a desperate plea. She recounted how the soldiers returned to harass her family after her husband's departure and had taken Lee away when he brandished the dagger. With no one else to turn to, she implored Zuko to rescue her son. Zuko condemned the soldiers as mere bullies and swiftly dispatched most of them, but the leader, Gao, proved to be an earthbender, posing a formidable challenge for Zuko and his broadswords alone. Recalling his mother's parting words urging him to remember his true identity, Zuko unleashed his firebending abilities to overpower Gao and boldly reveal his true heritage to the town. After retrieving his dagger, Zuko attempted to return it to Lee as a gesture of goodwill. However, Lee, still harboring resentment towards Zuko for his past association with the Fire Nation, refused the offer and expressed his disdain. Despite his heroic actions, Zuko found himself rejected by the townsfolk due to his Fire Nation background, prompting him to depart the village alone, carrying only his dagger. Reunion. Tracking Azula's tank train, Zuko eventually caught up with her in a deserted town where she was closing in on Aang and his companions. Taking a defensive stance, Zuko warned his sister to back off and let him handle Aang's capture. Unwilling to yield, Azula prepared for combat, setting the stage for a standoff between the three adversaries. When Azula made the first move by attacking Zuko, he was knocked down. A chaotic three-way battle ensued, with Azula demonstrating her dominance through relentless assaults that kept Aang and Zuko on the defensive. Engaging Azula in fiery exchanges, Zuko pursued her into a nearby building, where she landed a decisive blow that incapacitated him. Minutes later, Iroh, who had been covertly monitoring Zuko's actions, revived him, and the two joined forces with Aang and his allies, who had been standing by. As Azula was cornered by all six of them, she pretended to surrender, only to strike and severely injure Iroh when their guard was down. Witnessing his uncle's injury, Zuko, along with Aang, Katara, and Toph, retaliated with elemental attacks, but Azula swiftly vanished using a cunning firebending technique. Zuko rushed to Iroh's side, overwhelmed with sorrow. When Aang and his group approached to offer assistance, Zuko, consumed by anger, insisted they leave. Despite Katara's offer of aid, Zuko unleashed a fire blast, forcing them to flee and leaving him to care for his wounded uncle alone. Lightning. Zuko brought Iroh to a modest shack on the town's outskirts to treat his wound. After bandaging him, Zuko brewed tea, although Iroh politely accepted it despite not enjoying the taste. Upon awakening, Zuko recounted the encounter with Azula and expressed his desire to advance his firebending skills in preparation for their inevitable confrontation. Expecting resistance from his uncle, Zuko anticipated Iroh advising him to reconcile with his sister. However, to his surprise, Iroh agreed, acknowledging Azula's instability and the necessity of stopping her. They resumed Zuko's training, with Iroh delving into the intricacies of generating lightning. Stressing the importance of inner peace, Iroh emphasized that lightning bending required serenity rather than fury. Venturing to a cliffside, Iroh elaborated on the technique and demonstrated its execution. Eager to try, Zuko made unsuccessful attempts, resulting in explosive outcomes. Despite his persistence, each effort ended in failure, prompting Iroh to attribute Zuko's emotional turmoil as a barrier hindering his progress. Iroh urged Zuko to overcome his inner turmoil and shame before attempting lightning bending again. Instead of delving into lightning bending, Iroh proposed instructing Zuko in a firebending technique of his own creation. He commenced the lesson with a discourse on the distinctive attributes of each of the four nations. Stressing the importance of drawing wisdom and strength from various sources, Iroh encouraged Zuko to explore other cultures and elemental philosophies to achieve personal wholeness. Drawing a parallel to the Avatar's versatility, Iroh explained how incorporating teachings from all four nations could empower Zuko. Iroh then introduced Zuko to the technique he had derived from studying waterbenders, lightning redirection. He guided Zuko through the fluid, graceful movements akin to waterbending, emphasizing the principles of absorbing and redirecting energy integral to the technique. With diligent practice, Zuko eventually mastered the technique. Impressed by Zuko's progress, Iroh commended him, prompting Zuko to eagerly request a demonstration with actual lightning. Iroh expressed shock and adamantly refused, even going so far as to label the idea as insane. He warned Zuko of the immense danger associated with lightning bending, emphasizing that it was a technique best left unused unless absolutely necessary. Despite Iroh's warnings, Zuko remained determined. Observing a thunderstorm in the distance, he resolved to master the technique on his own terms. Climbing a mountain in the midst of the storm, he confronted the raging elements, venting his frustrations at the world and himself when he failed to summon lightning. Exhausted and overwhelmed with emotion, Zuko eventually succumbed to tears of bitter frustration. To Ba Sing Se, Zuko and Iroh journeyed to a desert oasis where Iroh established contact with a clandestine organization known as the Order of the White Lotus, of which he was a member. They discovered that the Fire Nation had issued substantial bounties on their heads when they discovered Shin Fu and Master Yu, who attempted to claim the rewards. However, with the assistance of the White Lotus, Zuko and Iroh managed to evade bounty hunters and obtain the necessary documentation to enter Ba Sing Se, capital city of the Earth Kingdom. Along the way, they crossed paths with Jet, who was also traveling to Ba Sing Se in search of a fresh start. Initially befriending Zuko, Jet became enraged upon noticing Iroh discreetly using firebending to heat his tea, vowing to expose them. Zuko and Iroh established themselves in Ba Sing Se, though Zuko harbored deep dissatisfaction with their new surroundings, viewing the city as a confining prison. Despite his reluctance, they both secured jobs as servers at a local tea house. Iroh, taking it upon himself, significantly elevated the quality of the tea served, earning himself a measure of renown. Meanwhile, Jet made numerous covert attempts to expose Zuko and Iroh as firebenders, all of which proved unsuccessful. His frustration culminated in a direct confrontation at the tea shop, where he challenged them to a fight, hoping to provoke a firebending response. Instead, Zuko, armed with dual swords, accepted Jet's challenge, leading to a prolonged and evenly matched battle until the intervention of the Dai Li, who arrested Jet for initiating the altercation. Despite his efforts to integrate into life in Ba Sing Se, Zuko's discomfort persisted, exemplified by an awkward encounter with Jin, a regular customer at the tea house who harbored feelings for him. Their date ended abruptly after a hesitant exchange of kisses, with Zuko retreating and citing the complexities of his situation. Back at their apartment, Iroh inquired about the date, prompting Zuko to initially evade the question before admitting with a hint of sincerity that it was nice. Crossroads of Destiny. After discovering a flyer created by Aang and his companions in their search for Appa, Zuko resolved to locate the missing bison and use it as bait to lure Aang. Disguised as the Blue Spirit, he coerced a Dai Li agent into revealing Appa's whereabouts. Infiltrating the Dai Li's hidden base beneath Lake Laogai, he located Appa imprisoned in a cell, but was confronted by Iroh. Uncharacteristically sharp, Iroh criticized Zuko's impulsive actions and questioned his plans upon retrieving Appa. Attempting to sway Zuko from his pursuit of the Avatar, a destiny imposed by his father, Iroh urged him to forge his own path. Despite Zuko's agonized indecision, he ultimately chose to free Appa. Discarding his Blue Spirit mask into the lake, Zuko and Iroh returned home, where Zuko succumbed to a severe fever. Iroh recognized that Zuko's internal struggle over his future and destiny had manifested physically, likening it to a transformative period. During his illness, Zuko experienced a series of vivid dreams and hallucinations, including one where he envisioned himself as the Fire Lord, devoid of his scar, while two dragons, one blue with Azula's voice and one red with Iroh's, offered conflicting advice. He also witnessed haunting images of his vanished mother pleading for his aid. At one point, Zuko appeared to awaken only to find himself with Aang's bald head and airbender tattoos in the mirror, prompting a horrified reaction before truly waking up and touching watching his scar in distress. Following his recovery from the fever, Zuko adopted a more positive outlook on his life in Ba Sing Se. He eagerly participated in the opening of Iroh's new tea shop and welcomed the invitation for them to serve tea at the Earth King's palace. However, the invitation turned out to be a trap orchestrated by Azula, who conspired with the Dai Li to overthrow the Earth King. While Iroh managed to escape, he urged Zuko to follow suit. Instead, Zuko opted to confront Azula directly. Challenging her to an Agni Kai, Zuko was met with Azula's mocking laughter as she ordered the Dai Li to arrest him. Subsequently imprisoned in a cave with Katara, Zuko silently endured her verbal attacks until she mentioned the loss of her mother at the hands of the Fire Nation. This shared pain served as a catalyst for understanding between them, leading Katara to apologize for her hostility. Touched by her gesture, Zuko acknowledged the significance of his scar and its symbolic meaning. Katara offered to attempt to heal his scar, and just as she prepared to do so, Iroh and Aang arrived to rescue them. Despite displaying signs of positive change, Zuko's deep-seated anger toward Aang resurfaced, leading to a tense confrontation between the two adversaries. However, Iroh intervened to prevent any violence, urging Aang and Katara to depart and locate their friends. As they left the cavern, Iroh attempted to persuade Zuko to abandon his pursuit once more. Their conversation was interrupted by Azula's arrival, accompanied by two Dai Li agents who immobilized Iroh using crystal restraints. Azula attempted to recruit Zuko to her cause, promising him redemption and his father's approval in exchange for capturing the Avatar. However, Iroh rejected her offer and urged Zuko to forge his own path. As Azula departed to engage Aang and Katara in battle, Zuko ultimately joined the fray, aligning himself with his sister and displaying a fervent determination to defeat Aang. Throughout the battle, Zuko and Azula worked in tandem, with Zuko assisting his sister in various confrontations. Despite Katara's efforts to defend herself using water shields, she was ultimately overpowered by the siblings, leaving her vulnerable to their combined attacks. Following the conclusion of the battle and Aang's grievous injury caused by Azula's lightning, Iroh intervened to facilitate Katara and Aang's escape. He valiantly held off Azula, Zuko, and the Dai Li agents, allowing the pair to safely flee the cavern. Despite his efforts, Iroh allowed himself to be captured. As Azula and Zuko returned in triumph to the Earth King's palace, Zuko found himself grappling with uncertainty and remorse over his actions, particularly his betrayal of Iroh. Azula, however, dismissed his concerns and shifted the blame onto Iroh, claiming that it was Iroh who had betrayed Zuko. Despite her reassurances that Zuko had restored his honor, he remained visibly conflicted about his choices. Returning home, despite his initial reluctance, Zuko hesitated to return to the Fire Nation as a celebrated hero. However, upon revealing his desire to remain in Ba Sing Se to his sister, she introduced him to an old friend from their childhood, Mai, who had harbored feelings for Zuko. After disrupting Azula's attempt at arranging a dinner date, Zuko and Mai took a stroll through the city, during which they shared a kiss and reminisced about their past. The next day, as Zuko bid farewell to Mai at the docks, he contemplated joining her on a journey, closely observed by Azula. As his sister observed Iroh being escorted onto a Fire Nation ship in chains, she expressed doubt about his survival. When Azula urged Zuko to make his own decision, he suddenly resolved to accompany them back to the Fire Nation. Weeks later, as their ship approached the Fire Nation's shores, Zuko confided in Mai about his apprehension regarding the changes in the Fire Nation and within himself. Despite the enthusiastic welcome from the citizens and Mai's reassurances, Zuko remained uncertain about his reception by his father and harbored doubts about the Avatar's demise, which he shared with Azula. Upon his return to the throne room, Zuko was surprised to receive a warm welcome and recognition from his father, who credited him with slaying the Avatar. Although taken aback by the false claim, Zuko contained his surprise, knowing it was Azula who had struck the fatal blow. Despite initially achieving the redemption he sought, Zuko confronted Azula that night about her motives for giving him credit. Azula explained that she did it out of generosity, as she recognized Zuko's anxiety about the Avatar's survival and sought to repay his role in the takeover of Ba Sing Se. However, Zuko remained skeptical of her explanation, accusing her of having ulterior motives. Azula calmly pointed out that giving Zuko all the glory for killing the Avatar served no purpose to her, but acknowledged the potential embarrassment should the Avatar be revealed to be alive. Despite her reassurances that the Avatar could not have survived, Zuko left the conversation feeling manipulated and deeply unsettled by the realization that even in his redemption, he was still being used. Zuko had been visiting his incarcerated uncle in secret, instructing the guard to keep it silent. However, Iroh remained steadfast in his refusal to entertain Zuko's notion of returning as a hero, prompting Zuko to dismiss him as a senile old man. During a picnic with Mai, they were unexpectedly interrupted by Azula, who warned Zuko about the implications of being caught visiting Iroh, hinting at potential suspicions of conspiracy. Despite delivering food to his uncle, Zuko expressed his inner turmoil to Iroh, admitting his conflicted feelings despite seemingly having attained everything he desired. Iroh maintained his silence and declined to offer any guidance. Subsequently, Zuko sought out an individual with a distinctive third eye tattoo, hiring them for a task related to the Avatar's demise. Later, Zuko, along with Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee, departed for a vacation at Ember Island, taking refuge at Lo and Lee's beach house. They chose to leave as Fire Lord Ozai convened a private meeting with his trusted advisors, ensuring they would not be implicated in any potential disturbances. While at the beach, Zuko attempted to impress Mai with various gestures, including presenting pretty shells and offering her ice cream. However, neither gesture had the desired effect. Mai remained unimpressed by the shells, and the ice cream ended up spilling on her leg due to Zuko's notorious streak of bad luck. Later, the group received an invitation to attend a party at Chan's house. During the party, after fetching some food for Mai, Zuko spotted Ronjian conversing with her. Overcome with jealousy, Zuko lost his temper and aggressively hurled him across the room, causing a scene. Mai, disgusted by Zuko's behavior, chastised him for a lack of control over his temper. In a fit of anger, Zuko accused Mai of being emotionless and indifferent, labeling her as boring. Hurt and offended by his words, Mai abruptly ended their relationship. Chan intervened and escorted Zuko out of the party. Zuko retreated to his family's abandoned vacation home, where he found himself flooded with memories of his childhood with Ursa, Ozai, and Iroh. While exploring the house, he stumbled upon a stone bearing his own baby handprint and noticed an old family portrait hanging on the wall, catching his attention. Azula discovered Zuko at the house, and they returned to the beach together. Despite Zuko's attempts to reconcile with Mai, she remained distant and aloof. As tensions rose, Zuko found himself venting about his internal struggles, confessing his feelings of anger and uncertainty. Pressured by the girls to provide an explanation, Zuko finally erupted, expressing his frustration at his own moral ambiguity. Understanding Zuko's turmoil, Mai approached him and declared that there was still one thing she cared about, leading to a reconciliation between them. Later in the weekend, the couple went on a date to the Ember Island arcade. During their time at the arcade, Zuko won a stuffed monkey tiger toy that Mai wasn't particularly interested in. Engaged in a game of street bender with Azula, Zuko initially struggled against his sister, who had been dominating children at the game for days. However, as Zuko started to improve, Azula resorted to secretly using her firebending to enhance her character's attacks. In a moment of frustration, Zuko attempted to employ the same tactic, but ended up destroying the game machine. Ty Lee jokingly suggested implementing a rule to prevent Zuko from playing in the future. Family history and disillusionment. Upon waking up, Zuko stumbled across a mysterious message instructing him to uncover the story behind his great-grandfather's death, which supposedly held the key to his own destiny. When he questioned Azula about it, she simply stated that Sozin had passed away peacefully in his sleep. Intrigued by the message, Zuko pondered its meaning until he impulsively tossed it over his lamp, revealing a hidden message on the other side. The hidden message directed him to seek out the secret history, supposedly kept by the Fire Sages in the Dragonbone Catacombs. Determined, Zuko discreetly followed one of the Fire Sages to locate the catacombs, where he ultimately discovered the final testament of Fire Lord Sozin. Zuko delved into the historical accounts of the once friendship between Avatar Roku and Fire Lord Sozin. Towards the end, Sozin mentioned his ongoing search for the new Avatar. Filled with outrage and confusion, Zuko confronted Iroh in his prison cell, accusing him of sending cryptic messages that provided little new insight. Zuko lamented that he had gleaned no additional information about Sozin's demise. However, Iroh calmly clarified that he was referring to Zuko's maternal grandfather, Avatar Roku. Overwhelmed by this revelation, Zuko sank to his knees, grappling with newfound confusion. Iroh imparted to Zuko that a constant struggle between good and evil resided within him, constituting his nature. Yet Iroh pointed out the silver lining. Zuko alone possessed the ability to restore honor to the Fire Nation and bring about peace. Subsequently, Iroh presented Zuko with a long-lost royal artifact, traditionally worn by the crown prince and passed down by both of his great-grandfathers. Iroh emphasized that Zuko had the power to either restore balance to the world or plunge it into chaos. Despite the initial shock of his family revelation, Zuko gradually regained his composure and began relishing his life as an esteemed prince in the weeks that followed. In the days leading up to the Day of Black Sun, Zuko relished in a life of luxury, with servants catering to his every whim and the adoration of the populace. He enjoyed romantic evenings with Mai, whose affectionate nature had become more apparent. During a visit to Mai's residence, conveniently located across from the royal palace, their happiness seemed boundless. Zuko's inquiry about Mai's deepest desires led to the revelation of her fondness for fruit tarts, a wish he promptly fulfilled with the assistance of his attentive servants. Mai casually mentioned that Azula had been invited to a war meeting with their father, but Zuko had not received an invitation. When Zuko confronted Azula about this, she assured him that his attendance was already expected, but he felt insulted by the omission and chose not to attend. Despite Mai's attempts to lift his spirits, Zuko remained disheartened. However, the following morning, Zuko found out that the war meeting had been postponed until his arrival, easing his concerns. During the meeting, Shinu reported ongoing rebellions in the Earth Kingdom despite the fall of Ba Sing Se. Ozai sought Zuko's perspective on the matter, considering his exile in the Earth Kingdom. Zuko emphasized the resilience and determination of the Earth Kingdom people, prompting Ozai to support Azula's proposal to devastate the Earth Kingdom. Though troubled by the decision, Zuko stayed silent, grappling with doubts about his nation and the war. After the meeting, Zuko shared with Maya that his father had seated him at his right side, much to her happiness. However, he confided in her that despite his efforts to fulfill his father's expectations, he realized he was not being true to himself, and that the war needed to end. Before the battle on the day of Black Sun, he gazed at a drawing of himself and Mai, expressing regret with the words, "I'm sorry." During the eclipse, he entered his father's chamber armed with dual broadswords. Zuko confessed to his father that Azula, not him, had dealt the killing blow to the Avatar, giving him the undeserved credit, suspecting that Aang might have survived. He confirmed his sister's deception, revealing that Aang was leading the invasion and heading towards Ozai. Enraged, Ozai ordered Zuko to leave, but he stood his ground using his swords to block his father's physical threat. Challenging his father, Zuko pointed out Ozai's absence during his childhood and condemned his cruel act of subjecting a 13-year-old to an Agni Kai, leaving him permanently scarred merely for speaking out of turn during a war meeting. He further accused the Fire Nation of deceiving its citizens about spreading greatness and prosperity through warfare, highlighting the destruction that they had caused to the world. Zuko asserted that it was time for an era of love and kindness to rectify the Fire Nation's actions. Zuko then declared his intention to seek forgiveness from his uncle and acknowledged Iroh's role as a true father figure in his life. He revealed his plan to join forces with the Avatar to overthrow Ozai. Despite Ozai's provocation to strike him down while he was defenseless without firebending, Zuko, armed with broadswords, refused to act, stating that it was the Avatar's destiny, not his, to defeat his father. As he prepared to leave the chamber, Ozai offered to disclose information about Zuko's mother. Intrigued by these revelations, Zuko decided to stay and listen further. Ozai recounted the events surrounding Azulan's death, explaining that after Azulan refused to pass Iroh's birthright to him, he was ordered to kill Zuko as punishment for his arrogance. Ozai admitted to planning to carry out the order, but revealed that his wife orchestrated a plan to save Zuko's life and ensure Ozai's ascension to the throne, resulting in Azulan's demise and her subsequent banishment. This sparked hope in Zuko, who inquired about his mother's whereabouts. Ozai acknowledged the possibility of her being alive, but declared that banishment was too lenient a punishment for her treason, hinting at harsher consequences for Zuko. As the eclipse ended, Ozai attacked Zuko with lightning, but Zuko skillfully redirected the bolt back at his father, stunning him and allowing Zuko to escape. Hurriedly making his way to the prison, Zuko discovered most of the guards incapacitated and Iroh's cell empty. The warden revealed that Iroh had single-handedly freed himself, describing him as a one-man army. With his uncle already liberated, Zuko resolved to join Team Avatar in their quest to defeat the Fire Lord, boarding a hot air balloon to catch up with them. Joining Team Avatar. Arriving at the Western Air Temple ahead of Aang and his friends, Zuko retreated into hiding as they landed on Appa. Later, at his woodland camp, he struggled to rehearse a speech aimed at convincing Team Avatar of his reformed intentions, using a badger frog as his audience with little success. Eventually, Zuko returned to the temple and faced Aang, Katara, Sokka, and Toph. Appa's unexpected display of gratitude for Zuko's aid in bossing Se surprised Aang. Attempting his speech, Zuko offered to instruct Aang in firebending, but the group remained skeptical, particularly Katara. As Zuko tried to apologize for his past actions, he inadvertently revealed his involvement in sending Combustion Man after them. Outraged, the group demanded his immediate departure. Zuko proposed becoming their captive instead, but Katara forcefully urged him to leave, using waterbending to emphasize her point. Defeated, Zuko returned to his camp, lamenting his failed attempt to join the group and regretting not blaming Azula for hiring Combustion Man, a statement that would have been believable. Later that evening, Toph, sensing Zuko's sincerity, approached him. Startled by the noise, Zuko instinctively firebent at the intruder, unaware it was Toph, inadvertently burning her feet. Despite his apologies and attempts to help, Toph defensively earthbent at him and retreated to the temple in panic. Feeling that he had shattered her trust in his sincerity, Zuko collapsed in frustration, questioning why he struggled so much with doing the right thing. The following day, Combustion Man located Team Avatar at the temple. Zuko intervened, attacking Combustion Man to protect Aang and his friends. Despite offering to increase his pay to cease hunting the Avatar, Combustion Man ignored Zuko's pleas and continued his assault. Zuko engaged in combat with the assassin, attempting to stop him with firebending, but finding himself restrained when Combustion Man grabbed his shirt. Managing to free himself with a well-placed kick, Zuko then caused Combustion Man to misfire, leading to a deadly explosion when his combustion bending backfired due to an injury sustained to his third eye. Saved by catching onto a vine at the last moment, Zuko narrowly escaped the blast. Zuko approached Team Avatar once again, expressing his apologies and acknowledging the challenges he had faced in recent years. He specifically apologized to Toph for the incident, recognizing recognizing the importance of mastering control over his bending and the potential danger of fire when left unchecked. Aang, empathizing with Zuko's struggles, suggested that Zuko could be his teacher, given their shared experiences with accidental firebending. Seeking to join the group once more, Zuko asked for their acceptance. Aang, Toph, and Sokka agreed, each providing their own reasons, albeit with varying degrees of jest and caution. Katara, while reluctantly permitting his inclusion, made it clear that her trust in him had not been fully regained. Despite this, Zuko pledged his commitment to not disappoint. As the rest of the gang entered the temple, Sokka guided Zuko to his room, where he unpacked his belongings, including a cherished picture of his uncle. Reflecting on his uncle's words about finding his destiny, Zuko was interrupted by Katara's arrival at his doorway. Despite the group's acceptance, Katara reiterated her lingering mistrust, issuing a stern warning: remastering firebending. Upon joining the group, Zuko initiated Aang's firebending training. However, when Aang struggled to generate fire, Zuko attempted to demonstrate, but could only produce feeble fire blasts. He attributed his inability to his lack of anger, which he believed to have fueled his bending when he was on the opposing side. Sharing his predicament with the rest of the group, Zuko became the subject of teasing from Sokka and Katara, with Sokka humorously labeling firebending as jerk bending, and Katara remarking on the irony of Zuko losing his bending now. However, Toph proposed a different perspective. She said that Zuko and Aang should seek guidance from the originators of firebending. Initially discouraged because firebending was thought to have originated from extinct dragons, Zuko remembered the ancient ruins of the Sun Warrior civilization near the Western Air Temple, suggesting they investigate there. Upon reaching the ruins, Aang narrowly avoided a booby trap, highlighting the potential danger of their exploration. Zuko skillfully navigated the trap, remarking that places with such defenses often concealed valuable secrets. As they explored further, Zuko shared a grim piece of history. His great-grandfather Sozin established a tradition where slaying a dragon granted the killer legendary firebending abilities and the title of dragon. This tradition led to the near extinction of dragons by the Fire Nation. Zuko's uncle was the one who claimed the last dragon, earning him the moniker the Dragon of the West, and the ability to breathe fire. Sozin also propagated the belief that firebending stemmed from anger and could only be used for destruction. Aang and Zuko stumbled upon a chamber adorned with statues arranged in a circular pattern, known as the Dancing Dragon, representing an ancient firebending form. After both of them successfully executed the form, a luminous gem materialized in the room's center. Despite Aang's caution, Zuko seized the jewel, inadvertently triggering another trap. They were eventually discovered by members of the Sun Warrior tribe. The tribe's chief informed them that to truly master firebending, they must seek guidance from the tribe's revered masters. Assigned with carrying a fireball up a mountain as a testament to their dedication, Aang and Zuko ascended to meet the masters. Upon reaching the mountain peak, they encountered the masters, two imposing dragons, one red and one blue. The dragons scrutinized the duo as Aang and Zuko performed the Dancing Dragon, emulating the dragon's movements. Impressed, the masters acknowledged their worthiness and showcased their firebending prowess by conjuring a spectacular rainbow-hued column of fire. Zuko and Aang remained astonished by the existence of dragons. Zuko had previously believed that his uncle Iroh had encountered and slain the last dragon, but the Sun Chief corrected him. It turned out that Iroh had encountered the dragons and, like Zuko and Aang, was deemed worthy to learn the original form of firebending. This revelation led Zuko to realize that firebending encompassed not only hate and destruction, but also beauty and vitality, explaining why he had lost his firebending ability. For so long, his pursuit of the Avatar had been his driving force, but upon joining forces with him, that drive dissipated, causing him to lose touch with his inner fire. However, his new purpose became aiding the Avatar in defeating the Fire Lord and restoring balance to the world. With this newfound resolve, Zuko regained his ability to generate powerful fire blasts, and Aang also discovered his capability to create fire. Upon reuniting with the group, Aang and Zuko demonstrated the firebending form they had learned. Sokka jestingly teased them, suggesting they could dance their way to defeating the Fire Lord. An irritated Zuko engaged in a brief argument with Sokka, but his frustration turned to embarrassment when he revealed that the form was called the Dancing Dragon, eliciting laughter from the group. At the team's dinner, Zuko took on the role of serving tea to everyone. In doing so, he tried to recall a tea joke that Uncle Iroh had previously shared, but only managed to remember the punchline. He admitted that the joke would have been funnier if it had been his uncle delivering it. While still busy serving tea, Zuko was pulled aside and questioned about the location where Fire Nation criminals were typically imprisoned, as Sokka was curious about the fate of his father, Hakoda. Initially hesitant to divulge this information, Zuko eventually relented under Sokka's persistence, despite warning him of potential consequences. He mentioned that Hakoda would likely have been taken to the Boiling Rock, an infamous prison situated on a volcanic island surrounded by a boiling lake, known for being impossible to escape from. Although Sokka claimed he had no immediate plans to to act on this information, Zuko remained wary of Sokka's intentions. Unbeknownst to the others, Zuko positioned himself on Appa's saddle and intercepted Sokka during the night, who was attempting to sneak away. Upon learning of Sokka's desire to rescue his father and redeem his honor, Zuko, empathizing with the sentiment of reclaiming one's honor, agreed to accompany him. He suggested they utilize his inconspicuous Fire Nation war balloon for the journey. Zuko left a fabricated note for the rest of the group indicating that they had departed temporarily for fishing, and encouraged Aang to continue practicing firebending techniques during their absence, much to Aang's chagrin. Into the Boiling Rock. During their journey to the Boiling Rock, Zuko and Sokka maintained an awkward silence for the most part. It was Sokka who eventually broke the quietude by mentioning that a friend of his had designed the war balloons. Zuko responded by acknowledging his father's prowess at warfare, to which Sokka quipped that it seemed to be a family trait. Zuko countered by mentioning his uncle, who he still felt regretful for betraying. Sokka attempted to console him by suggesting that his uncle would be proud of his decision to leave home and assist them, but Zuko expressed that it wasn't particularly difficult for him, especially since the only person he had truly left behind was his girlfriend, Mai, whom he didn't want to involve now that he was considered a traitor. This led to a moment of connection between Sokka and Zuko, with Sokka sharing the story of his first girlfriend who turned into the moon, to which Zuko expressed a degree of sympathy. Upon reaching the prison at night, they observed a significant amount of steam emanating from the volcano. The change in temperature caused the balloon's air to cool, resulting in it descending and crashing onto the prison, effectively trapping them there. Zuko voiced his concern to Sokka, remarking that there was no turning back now and hoping that Sokka was certain about their course of action. The following morning, Zuko and Sokka disguised themselves in Fire Nation guard uniforms. Upon entering the prison yard, they stumbled upon an ongoing altercation. A prisoner named Chit Sang had violated the rule of not showing deference to a prison guard. In response, a guard produced a fire whip to discipline Chit Sang. However, Chit Sang retaliated using his firebending abilities, which were forbidden within the prison. Consequently, Chit Sang was sentenced to confinement in a cooler, where firebenders were kept until they could no longer bend fire. Meanwhile, during the guards' lunch break, Zuko inquired with some of them about whether the Boiling Rock also housed prisoners of war. Later, Zuko and Sokka reconvened, and Zuko relayed the disappointing news to Sokka that there were no Water Tribe prisoners in the facility, much to Sokka's dismay. Feeling like he had failed once again, Sokka was downcast, but Zuko attempted to uplift his spirits by sharing one of Iroh's wise sayings, albeit fumbling over it. Despite Zuko's clumsy attempt, Sokka's mood improved when he spotted his girlfriend Suki returning to her cell. Sokka entered her cell to speak with her while Zuko kept watch outside. As Sokka and Suki shared a reunion, a guard approached to check on Suki. Initially, Zuko tried to prevent her entry with an excuse, resorting to physical force when that failed. When Sokka emerged, disguised once more, he assisted the guard in apprehending Zuko, though he whispered to Zuko that he had a plan. Resignedly, Zuko allowed himself to be captured and was escorted to a prison cell. While confined, Zuko was confronted by a warden who surprised him by revealing that he knew Zuko and accused him of breaking his niece's heart, a reference to Mai. Shortly after, Zuko and Suki were assigned to mop duty together, during which Suki recognized Zuko as the assailant from the attack on her village. Meanwhile, Sokka convened a meeting with them and Chit Sang, who overheard the discussion and insisted on being included in their escape plan. They devised a plan to utilize a cooler as a makeshift boat to navigate their way out, as its insulation properties would keep them safe from the scalding heat. Zuko volunteered to feign a fight with Chit Sang involving firebending, leading to his confinement in a cooler cell. Employing his fire breath to maintain warmth, Zuko successfully loosened the cooler's screws. However, they overheard guards discussing the arrival of new prisoners, including war captives scheduled for the next day, sparking hope in Sokka that he might reunite with his father Hakoda. That night, Zuko and Sokka transported the freed cooler cell to where Chit Sang, Suki, and Chit Sang's companions awaited. Aware of the impending arrival of new prisoners, Sokka resolved to remain behind to liberate his father. Suki and Zuko agreed to stay as well, while Chit Sang opted to depart. At dawn, Chit Sang and his companions attempted to navigate the makeshift vessel, but Chit Sang suffered burns from the boiling water, alerting the guards to their escape bid. Meanwhile, Sokka, Suki, and Zuko observed from concealment as the lift used to transport prisoners disgorged its occupants. Initially resigned to disappointment, Sokka's spirits lifted when the final person to emerge was revealed to be none other than his father. Following the emotional reunion between father and son, Sokka approached Zuko's cell to discuss their escape plan, but their conversation was cut short by the arrival of two Fire Nation guards. Sokka pretended to assault Zuko while discreetly communicating their rendezvous location. Subsequently, Zuko was transferred to another cell where he unexpectedly encountered Mai. Mai unleashed her frustration on Zuko, accusing him of callously abandoning her without a word, leaving her feeling betrayed and heartbroken. Zuko attempted to justify his actions by emphasizing his commitment to the Fire Nation's cause, but Mai struggled to comprehend understand how his betrayal could benefit their nation. Later, Sokka incited a riot with the assistance of Chit Sang, creating chaos within the prison. Seizing the opportunity presented by the commotion, the warden dispatched a guard to ensure Mai's safety. Zuko seized this moment to overpower the guard and secure Mai's protection by locking them both in a cell. With Mai safe, Zuko rejoined his allies and Suki successfully apprehended the warden. Together, the group proceeded towards the gondola, advancing their escape plan. Upon successfully boarding the gondola, Zuko disabled the lever to ensure their escape remained unhindered. However, their relief was short-lived as they realized they were being pursued by Azula and Ty Lee, prompting Zuko and Suki to eagerly anticipate a rematch with their adversaries. As the confrontation unfolded, Sokka, Suki, and Zuko ascended to the gondola's roof to engage Azula and Ty Lee in battle. Suki engaged Ty Lee in combat while Sokka and Zuko confronted Azula, with each pair evenly matched in their respective fights. Despite their efforts, the warden managed to break free and commanded the guards to sever the gondola's line, even at the cost of their own lives. With the guards following his orders, the situation grew dire. Just as the guards were on the verge of cutting the line, an unexpected intervention occurred. Mai, defying expectations, appeared and swiftly incapacitated the guards with her daggers, saving the group from imminent danger. In response to the guards' confusion regarding her actions, Mai explained that she was saving the jerk who dumped me. With the guards subdued, Mai freed the line, allowing the group's gondola to resume its journey to safety. The group successfully escaped the boiling rock, leaving the warden behind and proceeded on their journey. Upon their departure, Suki expressed uncertainty about their means of transportation. Zuko, however, deduced that Azula must have arrived at the boiling rock using an airship, which they could utilize for their own escape. Returning to the Western Air Temple, Katara inquired about Zuko's small war balloon. Zuko simply replied, "It sorta got destroyed." When the rest of the group inquired about procuring some meat, Sokka humorously responded that they did indeed obtain meat, the meat of friendship and fatherhood. Soon after, Hakoda, Suki, and Chit Sang emerged, prompting emotional reunions. Katara embraced her father warmly, with Sokka joining in, while Zuko observed the touching moment with a genuine smile, pleased to witness the genuine love between a father and his children, a stark contrast to his own family dynamic. Searching for the Southern Riders. As the group slept peacefully on the ground of the Western Air Temple, they were abruptly awakened by the sound of bombs raining down from a fleet of Fire Nation ships overhead. Aang swiftly used his airbending to seal the large doors, shielding the group from harm. In a moment of peril, Zuko acted quickly to protect Katara, pushing her out of harm's way as debris threatened to collapse upon her. Katara, startled and angered by his actions, demanded to know what he was doing. Zuko explained that he was preventing the rocks from crushing her, but Katara pushed him away dismissively, stating that she wasn't crushed and instructing him to get off her. Zuko, unfazed, quipped, "I'll take that as a thank you," before rising to his feet. Amidst the chaos of their escape, Zuko took on the role of a distraction, sensing that Azula was involved in the attack. Confronting his sister, he questioned her presence, to which she coldly replied that she was about to celebrate becoming an only child, indicating her intent to kill him. Zuko engaged Azula in a fierce battle atop one of the airships, risking his life to protect his comrades. As the confrontation reached a critical point, Zuko found himself plummeting from the vessel, only to be saved by the timely arrival of the rest of the team on Appa, who caught him mid-air. Observing Azula's descent, Zuko was filled with concern, fearing he may have inadvertently caused her demise. However, his worries were soon dispelled when Azula skillfully maneuvered herself to safety, using her hairpin to anchor herself on the cliffside. Following the morning's events, as the group settled down, Aang remarked on the nostalgia of camping, likening it to old times. Zuko lightened the mood with a jest, suggesting he could recreate their past by chasing Aang around in an attempt to capture him. This elicited laughter from everyone but Katara, who still harbored resentment towards Zuko. Sokka proposed a toast to Zuko, but Zuko modestly declined, stating he didn't deserve it. Katara coldly concurred and stormed off in frustration. Zuko trailed after Katara, seeking to understand the source of her bitterness toward him and why everyone seemed to trust him now. Katara unleashed her pent-up frustrations, reminding Zuko of how she was the first to trust him in Ba Sing Se, only to feel betrayed by his actions. Prompted by her anger, Zuko inquired how he could make amends, to which Katara sarcastically suggested he reconquer Ba Sing Se in the Earth King's name, or bring her mother back from the dead. With that, she left Zuko to ponder her words. Later, Zuko inadvertently interrupted a private moment between Sokka and Suki, prompting him to broach the topic of their mother's death with Sokka. Believing it to be the reason behind Katara's resentment towards him, Zuko learned that the leader of the Southern Raiders, a fleet of Fire Nation warships, was responsible for their mother's demise. Motivated to right this wrong, Zuko offered his assistance to Katara in seeking justice for her mother's murder, which she accepted. When Aang advised Katara to let go of her anger and reject the path of vengeance, Zuko criticized Aang's perspective. Zuko briefed Katara on the necessity of infiltrating a Fire Nation communication tower to locate the elusive Southern Raiders. Discovering the raiders' presence on Whaletail Island, they swiftly departed on Appa. During the journey, Katara recounted her mother's fate from her perspective. Upon encountering the Southern Raiders at her family's home, Katara witnessed her mother in the company of their leader, instilling fear in her. Her mother reassured her before sending her to find her father. Racing back to their igloo with Hakoda, they arrived too late to prevent tragedy. Zuko commended Katara's mother's bravery, a sentiment she echoed while touching her necklace. Arriving at Whaletail Island, they stormed the Southern Raiders' ship, dispatching soldiers en route to the command center where they believed the leader awaited. Confronting him, the leader professed ignorance of their accusations, bewildered by their presence. Zuko observed Katara's formidable power as she blood-bent the leader, a skill he was unaware she possessed. Despite the leader's claims of innocence, Katara released him upon realizing he was not their target. Zuko interrogated him to ascertain the whereabouts of the true culprit, veteran leader Yan Ra, before setting off with Katara. Zuko and Katara eventually located the individual responsible for Kaya's death. Initially, the man had no recollection of the incident, but memories resurfaced as he recounted encountering the Water Tribe girl and her mother. Katara revealed that her mother had sacrificed herself to protect the last waterbender, herself. Despite having the opportunity for vengeance, Katara found herself unable to take his life. Upon rejoining the group on Ember Island, Katara confided in Zuko that she had forgiven him, embracing him warmly in a gesture of gratitude and acceptance. Zuko, in turn, sought Aang's perspective on confronting Ozai, believing that resorting to killing was never the solution. The Ember Island players. While stationed at Ember Island, the group attended a play depicting their adventures, albeit with a twisted plot aimed at demoralizing them. Among the group, Zuko had one of the most adverse reactions to the play, feeling deeply affected as it seemed to highlight all the mistakes he had made in his life. Particularly poignant was the scene depicting his betrayal of Iroh, a moment of profound shame for Zuko as he realized the depth of Iroh's paternal influence compared to Ozai's. Toph later shared with him a conversation she had with Iroh, revealing his fondness for Zuko, which sparked a glimmer of hope in Zuko regarding Iroh's continued love for him. The play culminated in a scene where Azula's character killed him with fire, inciting applause from the audience, leaving Zuko visibly taken aback. As Team Avatar departed, Zuko expressed his dissatisfaction with the play, a sentiment echoed by the rest of the group. Sozin's Comet. 3 days prior to the arrival of Sozin's Comet, Zuko dedicated himself to rigorously training Aang in firebending, emphasizing the need for rapid improvement and urging him to adopt a more aggressive approach. However, Aang's focus waned, leading him to join the group on a beach party instead. Frustrated by the lack of dedication to training, Zuko initiated an impromptu sparring session with Aang, hoping to instill a sense of urgency in him for his impending battle with Ozai. Zuko relentlessly pursued Aang across the yard and into the house, unleashing bursts of firebending at him throughout. Eventually, Aang retaliated by airbending at Zuko, sending him crashing out of the house. Upon rejoining the group, Zuko expressed his frustration, admonishing them for indulging in beach parties when the comet loomed only 3 days away. In response, Aang and the others explained their strategy to wait until after the comet's passing to confront the Fire Lord, citing the loss of hope after the fall of Ba Sing Se and Aang's need to further train. Shocked by Zuko's revelation of his father's plan, the group realized the urgency of the situation, understanding that failure to defeat Ozai before the comet's arrival could spell the end of the world. Zuko imparted one final crucial technique to Aang before his showdown with the Fire Lord: lightning redirection. Reconciliation. The next morning, the group awoke to discover Aang and Momo missing. Opting to split up, Toph eagerly joined Zuko, hoping for her own transformative experience with him. Throughout the journey, Toph vented her frustrations about her parents to Zuko, but found his sympathy lacking due to the seriousness of the situation. Despite an exhaustive search of the island yielding no results, the group relied on Zuko's tracking skills, given his experience in locating the Avatar. Zuko guided them to a seedy tavern in the Earth Kingdom where they encountered June. Urging her to track down Aang for the sake of the world, Zuko's request proved futile as the Shirshu couldn't pick up Aang's scent. Initially fearing the worst, the group was relieved when June clarified that Aang hadn't perished but had simply vanished without a trace. Determined not to lose hope, Zuko suggested seeking out another individual capable of defeating Ozai, his uncle Iroh. Providing June with a scent sample in the form of Iroh's sweaty sandals, Zuko entrusted her with the task of locating him. Following June's Shirshu, the group traced the scent to the outer wall of Ba Sing Se. Upon their arrival, June bid them farewell and departed. Later that night, the group encountered 4 members of the Order of the White Lotus: Pakku, Bumi, Zhang, and Piandao. Leading them to a camp, the White Lotus members revealed their intention to free Ba Sing Se from Fire Nation control. Zuko was escorted to his uncle's tent by the group. Filled with apprehension, Zuko hesitated to enter his uncle's tent, fearing Iroh's resentment. With encouragement from Katara, he mustered the courage to step inside and found his uncle asleep. Tearfully, Zuko confessed his remorse to Iroh, pleading for forgiveness. Iroh, upon waking, warmly embraced him, expressing not anger but sorrow over Zuko's perceived loss of direction. He reassured Zuko of his pride and finding his path once more and embraced him with love. The next day, Zuko implored Iroh to join the fight against Ozai, believing him to be the only one capable of defeating the Fire Lord besides Aang. However, Iroh declined, stating that even if he could defeat Ozai, it would only perpetuate senseless violence. He emphasized that Aang must be the one to bring about peace by defeating Ozai. When Zuko inquired about his own role after the war, Iroh insisted that the Fire Nation needed a new leader of unwavering honor, Zuko himself. Initially doubtful of his own worthiness, Zuko questioned whether he possessed such honor after his past mistakes. However, Iroh affirmed that Zuko's journey of redemption was what truly defined his worthiness. He urged Zuko to return to the Fire Nation and confront Azula for the nation's future. Agni Kai. Accompanied by Katara and Appa, Zuko traveled to the Fire Nation capital during Azula's coronation ceremony. Upon arrival, Azula challenged Zuko to an Agni Kai for the throne, which he accepted despite Katara's warnings about Azula's instability. Fueled by the power of Sozin's comet, Zuko and Azula engaged in a fierce Agni Kai, unleashing powerful firebending that devastated much of the capital. Despite Azula's initial advantage, Zuko's perseverance and skill allowed him to gain the upper hand as he deftly countered each of her attacks. Recognizing Azula's deteriorating mental state, Zuko taunted her for her reluctance to use lightning, confident in his ability to redirect it if she did. Provoked, Azula readied herself to unleash lightning on Zuko, but her attention was diverted when she spotted Katara in the distance. Without hesitation, Azula redirected her attack towards Katara. Zuko, acting swiftly, intercepted the bolt, shielding Katara from harm. Despite his efforts, he couldn't fully deflect the lightning away from his heart, leaving him gravely wounded on the ground. As Katara attempted to heal him, Azula resumed her assault, forcing Katara into a defensive position amidst the pillars. Zuko, incapacitated, could only watch helplessly as Katara struggled against Azula's formidable blue firebending, unable to offer any aid. Thankfully, Katara managed to lure Azula into a large body of water, equipping herself with chains to subdue her. Utilizing the water, Katara froze it into solid ice and bound Azula to the grate with the chains. With Azula temporarily incapacitated, Katara hurried back to Zuko and began to heal him, receiving his gratitude, though she insisted it was she who owed him thanks. As they both rose to their feet, they witnessed Azula, now consumed by madness, breathing fire uncontrollably while crying. Observing the tragic mental deterioration of his once formidable sister, Zuko, accompanied by Katara, felt pity and sadness towards her. Coronation. Following his clash with Azula, Zuko rekindled his romance with Mai, who had been released from imprisonment by her uncle. During his subsequent coronation as Fire Lord, with representatives from all nations and the Avatar present, he pledged to collaborate with Aang in rebuilding the world and to seek redemption for the Fire Nation's past transgressions. Shortly afterward, he paid a visit to his incarcerated father. Despite Ozai's sarcastic tone expressing faux gratitude for the visit from the new Fire Lord, Zuko reminded him of his fortune in being spared by the Avatar. He suggested that perhaps time behind bars might guide Ozai towards the right path, much like his own exile had done for him. When Ozai inquired about his purpose for visiting, Zuko pressed for information regarding Ursa's whereabouts. In response, Ozai taunted Zuko, suggesting they should have a conversation over tea, reminiscent of the talks Zuko had with Iroh. Frustrated, Zuko turned to leave, but Ozai cynically warned him about the burdens of rulership and how they could alter a person. He assured Zuko that one day he would return seeking advice, even from within his cell. Not long after his coronation, Zuko journeyed to Ba Sing Se to partake in festivities and strategize for the future. Meeting with Earth King Kui and Team Avatar at the palace, they brainstormed the Harmony Restoration movement, with Zuko firmly advocating for the complete withdrawal of Fire Nation colonies from the Western Earth Kingdom shores. In the closing scene, the entire group, consisting of Aang, Sokka, Katara, Toph, Suki, Zuko, Mai, and Iroh, gathered at the Jasmine Dragon tea shop. Zuko served tea to everyone while his uncle entertained them with the Sungi horn. Iroh humorously critiqued Sokka's painting of the group, jokingly remarking on his spiky hair resembling a porcupine, eliciting laughter. Toph playfully remarked that the painting looked perfect to her. Later, while riding on Appa as a group, Zuko solemnly asked Aang to promise that if Zuko ever started resembling his father in behavior, Aang would end his life. Reluctantly, Aang agreed to Zuko's request. Zuko initiated significant reforms within the Fire Nation government. He introduced changes to diminish the dictatorial nature of the Fire Lord's office and steer the nation away from its history of nationalism, imperialism, and militarism. As part of this effort, he restructured the education system to incorporate the teachings of the ancient Sun Warriors. This involved mandating the teaching of their firebending techniques, such as the dancing dragon, in schools, and promoting their composed yet powerful demeanor as a foundation for firebending instruction. Zuko initiated the removal of the majority of Ozai's loyalists from their positions, with only a few exceptions such as Ukano. He committed to prosecuting Fire Nation individuals responsible for the most egregious war crimes during the 100-Year War. However, the process of identifying and apprehending suspects proved challenging for his investigators due to the extensive duration and scale of the conflict, coupled with a lack of documentation for many offenses. Despite his efforts at reform and reconciliation with other nations, a faction within the Fire Nation and the colonies grew to despise Zuko, branding him a traitor to their cause. In response to Zuko's reforms and conciliatory policies, underground rebel groups emerged, seeking to reinstate Ozai to power. Despite multiple assassination attempts, all efforts to eliminate Zuko failed. Moreover, certain officials within the Fire Nation bureaucracy clandestinely worked to subvert the Fire Lord's initiatives and foment unrest within the system. Nonetheless, Zuko managed to garner support from influential figures like Iroh, a military commander who embraced his vision and reforms. Zuko also made significant cuts to military expenditure, downsizing the Fire Army considerably. In doing so, he inadvertently halted clandestine agreements struck by Ozai with dubious factions. Notably, the cessation of regular payments disrupted the operations of the Crimson Sails Armada, a long-standing alliance of corsairs, leading to internal strife within the organization due to the sudden loss of funding. End of the Harmony Restoration movement. 1 year into his reign, Zuko faced 5 assassination attempts, with the latest orchestrated by Kori, the daughter of Morishita, the mayor of Yudao. Despite overcoming the palace guards, Kori failed to subdue Zuko, who captured her and uncovered the motive behind her attack. The Fire Lord journeyed to Yudao to confront Mayor Morishita, intending to clarify the goals of the Harmony Restoration movement. However, Morishita's opposition led to a heated exchange, invoking comparisons to Zuko's father, Ozai, triggering memories of a visit Zuko made to his imprisoned father. During their conversation, Ozai prophesied Zuko's eventual return, suggesting the challenges of ruling a nation single-handedly. In response, Zuko affirmed his divergence from his father, prompting Morishita to acknowledge that while Zuko had faults, he was not a coward or traitor like Ozai. Enraged by Morishita's defiance, Zuko ordered his arrest, but the guards were thwarted by an earthbender, Mrs. Morishita. Mrs. Morishita pleaded with the Fire Lord to pardon her husband's remarks, revealing her own earthbending abilities and highlighting the diverse community thriving in Yudao. Moved by her pleas, Zuko renounced the Harmony Restoration movement and permitted the Fire Nation colonists to remain. Surprised to discover that both Mrs. Morishita and their daughter were earthbenders, Zuko realized that the inhabitants of Yudao had integrated to the extent of forming families across national boundaries. This realization led Zuko to permit the Fire Nation colonists to remain in the city and declare his rejection of the Harmony Restoration movement. Upon learning of Zuko's renunciation of the Harmony Restoration movement, Team Avatar journeyed to Yudao, where Zuko was residing. Aang and Katara attempted to approach the Fire Lord by flying over the city walls, only to be halted by the Fire Nation guards who insisted that entry required Zuko's authorization, even for the Avatar. Aang explained that he merely wished to speak with Zuko. In response to Aang and Katara's attempted entry, the guards resorted to firebending aggression. After defeating the guards, Zuko seized Katara, reprimanding her for attacking his people. Aang, incensed by Zuko's actions, demanded her release, but Zuko insisted on her cessation of hostilities first. Aang intervened with airbending to separate Zuko and Katara, provoking Zuko to retaliate and prompting Aang to enter the Avatar state. Despite Katara's warning about the potential loss of control in such a state, she managed to calm Aang down. Agreeing to dialogue, the Fire Lord accompanied the couple on a tour of Yudao, illustrating the deep integration of the citizens' lives within the colony. Katara proposed a discussion with Kuei on the matter, a suggestion to which both the Avatar and Fire Lord concurred. Upon returning to the capital city, Zuko encountered Mai, who noticed his exhaustion and encouraged him to confide in her about any troubles he may be facing. Zuko agreed, assuring her that he wouldn't let it happen again. Mai then informed him of her decision to bring the Kyoshi warriors for enhanced palace protection. Later that night, Zuko awoke feeling unsettled, prompting him to investigate. Suki and Ty Lee reassured him that all was quiet. Feeling confused, Zuko sought solace in a drink of water, ultimately deciding to brew tea for his imprisoned father. Kneeling before Ozai, Zuko sought advice, grappling with his struggle to find the right path and overcome his insomnia. Seeking guidance from Ozai, Zuko was met with a proclamation of absolute authority, as Ozai declared that whatever Zuko decided was inherently correct by virtue of his position as Fire Lord. Rejecting this notion, Zuko asserted his belief in a greater good beyond his own decisions, prompting an enraged response from Ozai, who dismissed Zuko from his presence, accusing him of weakness. As Zuko deliberated on his actions, Mai confronted him about his clandestine meetings with Ozai, expressing hurt over his lack of transparency. Despite apologizing and professing his love, Mai asserted that his secrecy demonstrated a greater affection for his hidden agendas than for her, prompting her to terminate their relationship. Following Mai's departure, Suki approached Zuko, apologizing and bowing before him, feeling responsible for their breakup. She revealed that she had informed Mai about Zuko's nightly discussions in hopes of assisting him, as she and the Kyoshi warriors were concerned for his well-being. Meanwhile, when General Mak arrived to report Earth King Kuei's impending invasion of Yu Dao, Zuko set aside his personal issues and swiftly mobilized his fleet to defend the colony against the Earth Kingdom army. While asleep aboard his ship, Zuko and Aang experienced a shared dream where they encountered the spirits of Ozai and Roku looming behind them. In the dream, Zuko struggled to articulate his conflicting emotions regarding the Harmony Restoration movement, torn between his duty to protect his people and his initial commitment to the movement. Ozai's voice echoed in Zuko's mind, emphasizing the Fire Lord's authority in determining what is right. Feeling incapable of finding the right path independently, Zuko willingly offered himself to Aang. As Aang entered the Avatar state to honor his promise to Zuko, the Fire Lord noticed his mother's sorrowful presence behind Roku's spirit and comforted her, urging her not to cry. Meanwhile, Aang unleashed an elemental attack towards Zuko, but before he could fulfill his vow to end Zuko's life, both teenagers abruptly awoke in shock. Struggling with inner conflict, Zuko sought counsel by conversing with a portrait of his uncle, Iroh. His introspection was interrupted by a soldier's report that the fleet had reached Earth Kingdom shores, prompting Zuko to prepare for battle and lead his troops. As the Fire Nation forces arrived at the gates of Yu Dao, they coincided with the Earth Kingdom's orders to initiate the assault. Just before combat commenced, Toph utilized her metal-bending skills to disable all the screws in the Fire Nation tanks, throwing their troops into disarray. Amidst the chaos, General Hao instructed his Earth Kingdom soldiers to enter Yu Dao and apprehend the colonials, a move countered by Zuko's command to his ground troops to protect the Fire Nation citizens within the colony. This directive led to a clash between the opposing armies. When Hao's forces threatened Kori, Sokka, and Sneers, Zuko intervened, engaging in a duel with the general. However, their confrontation was interrupted by Aang, who entered the Avatar state. Convinced that Aang intended to fulfill his promise, Zuko implored Aang to reconsider, but quickly resigned himself to the belief that his own demise was inevitable. Removing his helmet, Zuko observed as Aang demonstrated impressive earthbending skills to create a chasm between Yu Dao and the warring armies. However, positioned too close to the edge of the newly formed abyss, the ground beneath Zuko's feet gave away, causing him to fall. Just as he was about to meet his demise, Aang intervened, saving Zuko from certain death. Upon hearing Aang's explanation to Earth King Kuei, Zuko realized the righteousness of his actions and collapsed. Awakening 4 days later at Iroh's Jasmine Dragon, Zuko found himself chided by his uncle for his delayed visit. Aang soon joined him at the table, where they engaged in a discussion about the future of Yu Dao, recognizing the impossibility of maintaining its status as either a Fire Nation colony or an Earth Kingdom town. Reflecting on their shared dream, Zuko relieved Aang of his promise, understanding the weight it placed on the Avatar's shoulders. During their conversation, Zuko recounted the vision of his mother in the dream and expressed his longing to find her, believing it could provide clarity to his identity. However, his previous attempts to locate her had been unsuccessful. Recognizing the need for more information about his mother's departure, Zuko acknowledged that Ozai would never cooperate. Driven to uncover the truth, he resolved to seek assistance from the only person he believed could coax the necessary information from Ozai, Azula, searching for Ursa. Following the conflict over Yu Dao, Zuko participated in a meeting with his friends and government officials at the governor of Yu Dao's residence to discuss the city's future. While a professor delivered a lecture on ancient Earth Kingdom philosophies concerning the four nations, Zuko found his attention waning until the mention of the word family. Seeking clarification on the professor's statement, Zuko listened intently as the man drew parallels between familiar relationships and government. Reflecting on these insights, Zuko pondered the implications of his mother's banishment, his decision to incarcerate his father, and his sister's institutionalization on the Fire Nation. Prompted by Aang's concern, Zuko contemplated the significance of these actions. Inspired by the professor's words, Zuko returned home and arranged for his father and sister to be placed in adjacent cells, hoping to facilitate dialogue between them to uncover information about Ursa's whereabouts. Despite Suki's report that Ozai and Azula had remained silent, Zuko entered the room, offering tea in an attempt to alleviate the tension. Nevertheless, Azula interpreted his gesture of goodwill as a taunt regarding her restraint, and promptly knocked him down by seizing the tray with her teeth, much to Ozai's amusement. Though Zuko attempted to intervene to prevent Ty Lee from chi-blocking Azula, he was too slow to act. Recalling the two Kyoshi warriors, Zuko carefully assisted a now paralyzed Azula back to her seat, where she would reside henceforth. Accompanied by Suki and Ty Lee, Zuko dismissed them to facilitate a private conversation with his sister. Alone with Azula, he inquired about her decision with their father, but she deflected the question, instead asking if he had ever experienced chi-blocking. Upon Zuko's negative response, Azula elaborated on the sensation, describing the moment of extreme flexibility before gaining control. Demonstrating her point, she contorted her arm out of the straitjacket and launched a lightning bolt at Zuko. Reacting quickly, Zuko commanded her to cease, retaliating with a fire blast as she fled, inadvertently freeing herself in the process. Forced on the defensive, Zuko engaged in a duel with Azula as she unleashed blue fire blasts, eventually escaping into an adjacent building. Following his sister into one of Ozai's concealed chambers accessed through a firebending triggered door, Zuko witnessed Azula's frenzied search through a chest, driven by her desire for their father's disclosure of the truth. Zuko demanded the letters written by Ursa that Azula had discovered, yet she callously incinerated all of them before his eyes, except for one, unbeknownst to Zuko. To gain access to the remaining information, Zuko agreed to Azula's stipulation to allow her to accompany him, unrestrained and with dignity, on their quest to locate their mother. Zuko rallied his friends to join them on their journey, but when they arrived at the palace and saw Azula present, he had to clarify the situation, explaining her role in the upcoming trip to Hiraa and eventually persuading his hesitant friends to accept the arrangement. Prior to their departure the following day, Zuko reassured Katara by emphasizing the importance of keeping a close eye on Azula at all times. Their departure was marred by an immediate altercation when Azula unleashed a lightning bolt at Sokka, prompting the others to intervene. Threatening her with his firebending, Zuko reminded Azula of the agreement they'd made. Approaching nightfall, Zuko found himself once again restraining Azula, pulling her back from a disturbing episode. As they neared Hiraa, he suggested making camp to avoid entering the town under cover of darkness like a group of trespassers. However, his attention was diverted when Aang reacted to the presence of a spirit with a grimace. Despite Zuko's efforts, he couldn't perceive the spirit Aang mentioned. Seizing the opportunity, Azula took advantage of the distraction to perch on the edge of Appa's saddle and leap off. Zuko was stunned by her audacity, knowing the fall from such a height would likely prove fatal. Thanks to Aang's timely intervention, Azula safely descended and attempted to flee, with Zuko in hot pursuit. Tracking her to a riverside, he discovered her engaged in conversation with herself. Questioning her actions, Zuko braced himself for a potential confrontation, but Azula indicated she no longer required his assistance and assumed a combat stance. Before their clash could escalate, Katara intervened, halting the conflict. Meanwhile, the wolf spirit appeared by the riverbank, its markings mirroring the grim expression Aang had made earlier. As the spirit turned hostile and lunged at Aang, Zuko retaliated with a fire attack, only to be astonished when the creature consumed his flames and emitted a belch. A skirmish ensued with Appa, resulting in the spirit regurgitating a swarm of moth wasps that assaulted the team. Despite Zuko's initial refusal to entertain Azula's plea for assistance, she persisted, asserting that she could be of help and emphasizing the importance of trusting one's family. Convinced by her argument, Zuko relented and melted her icy restraints, allowing her the opportunity to aid them in their predicament. As night descended, the team established their campsite. Zuko and Sokka sat around a campfire while Azula slept at a distance. Aang meditated and Katara rested beside Appa with Momo. Responding to Sokka's inquiry, Zuko explained his decision to allow Azula to sleep without restraints, citing her previous aid in saving them from the moth wasps. He reassured Sokka, expressing confidence in Katara and Aang's vigilance while guarding her in shifts. Curious about Sokka's late-night activities, Zuko was met with a humorous explanation involving Sokka's excess water consumption to rid himself of the moth-wasp taste. Despite finding Sokka's reasoning amusing, Zuko was moved when Sokka demonstrated care for Katara by covering her with the blanket. Reflecting on Sokka's gestures, Zuko pondered why Sokka still harbored such concern for his sister, despite her past antics of pelting him with snowballs. After receiving Sokka's straightforward explanation that he didn't mind the unequal treatment with his sister, Zuko felt inspired to show more kindness to his own sister. He gently covered Azula in a warm blanket. However, as he prepared to return to his seat, he noticed a letter protruding from her boot. He cautiously removed it, carefully not to disturb her, and as he read its contents, his shock intensified with each word. The letter, penned by his mother to Ikem, hinted that Zuko might be Ikem's son rather than Ozai's. The following morning, Zuko and Aang had a private conversation near a cliff, discussing the contents of the letter. Aang displayed visible shock upon learning about Zuko's potentially illegitimate lineage. Zuko, however, confessed that he felt a sense of hope and relief upon considering the possibility of not being Ozai's biological son. He speculated that this revelation might explain why he was banished and mistreated by Ozai during his childhood. When Aang questioned why Ozai hadn't immediately disposed of Zuko upon learning the truth, Zuko recounted how Ozai had initially intended to kill him as ordered by Fire Lord Azula, following Ozai's request for Iroh's birthright of succession. However, Ursa had intervened, preventing Ozai from carrying out the deed. Despite Aang's attempts to caution Zuko against embracing his newfound belief and his potential consequences for his rule, their conversation was cut short by Azula's sudden appearance, demanding to know the whereabouts of her letter. Zuko and Aang found themselves in a fierce battle against Azula, with the Avatar expressing concern for Katara and Sokka's safety. Zuko urged Aang to check on them while he continued to confront Azula. Amidst their intense exchange, Azula taunted Zuko about their mother and her destined role as Fire Lord. Zuko tried to gain an advantage by disrupting Azula's balance, but she swiftly countered his move and struck him in the chest, throwing him off balance. Seizing the opportunity, Azula snatched the letter from Zuko's tunic. However, before she could strike the final blow, Zuko grabbed her ankle, preventing her from attacking. He confronted her about their constant conflicts and questioned why they couldn't stop fighting. Azula's response about their mother led Zuko to throw her over the cliff, but not before she realized that Zuko hadn't burned the letter despite having it all night. With a sense of sadness, Zuko watched her fall, leaving Azula to wonder if her brother intended for her to have the letter. Zuko suggested they continue their search for their mother, and the siblings returned to the camp where the others had extinguished the fire Azula had made. Boarding Appa, they flew toward Hira'a. Upon arrival, Zuko proposed they wear disguises to blend in, allowing them to enter the town unnoticed. While there, they witnessed the finale of Love Amongst the Dragons, sparking memories of their childhood reenactments after watching the Ember Island players. Zuko humorously noted his recurring role as the Dark Water Spirit. After the play, they inquired about Ursa, leading them to the director of the acting company, Noren. He invited them to his home to discuss Ursa in private, a gesture for which Zuko expressed gratitude. At Noren's house, Kiyi, the director's daughter, offered to show them her doll, which Zuko accepted with enthusiasm. He later scolded Azula for frightening Kiyi by threatening her doll. Through their conversations, they discovered that Ursa had left town years ago for official business, and her former boyfriend Ikem had departed for Forgetful Valley to escape his past. Later, Team Avatar expressed their gratitude to the family for their assistance and took their leave. While walking back, Zuko was approached by a solemn Aang who apologized for his earlier reaction and proposed burning the letter and abandoning the search for Ikem. Zuko confessed that he no longer had the letter. He had allowed Azula to keep it. He emphasized the importance of focusing on their current mission and dealing with his personal matters later. In response, Aang urged Zuko to listen, explaining that people didn't bow to the Fire Lord himself, but to the era of peace he represented. Regardless of his parentage, Aang encouraged Zuko to remain on the throne and uphold that vision of peace. Their conversation was abruptly interrupted by Sokka, who inquired about the duration of their mission, citing escalating tensions between Katara and Azula. Zuko announced that the mission would conclude after their visit to the Forgetful Valley. Upon their arrival, Zuko intervened when Azula attempted to burn down the surroundings to mark their path. Despite further discord among the group, they eventually reached a serene pond. Zuko remarked upon the tranquility of the scene, likening it to a perfect pane of glass, while Aang emphasized the spiritual significance of the place. However, tensions rose once more when Azula disturbed the pond by shooting lightning into it after seeing her mother's reflection. The peaceful atmosphere was interrupted further by an attack from vines and other plant life. After Aang freed Zuko from being trapped by the vegetation, Katara identified the attackers as other waterbenders, putting an end to the conflict. Rafa and Misu emerged from hiding, and together with Team Avatar, they established a small camp to engage in discussion. As Misu recounted their life story, detailing her lifelong dedication to caring for her brother and her willingness to do anything for him, Zuko and Azula avoided making eye contact with each other. When Aang proposed helping the siblings by entering the spirit world, Azula expressed her disapproval and began to walk away. Zuko tried to stop her, emphasizing Aang's role as the Avatar and a trusted friend, suggesting that helping others aligned with Aang's principles. Azula retorted, suggesting that Zuko preferred to travel the world aiding the less fortunate rather than fulfilling his duties as Fire Lord. Despite Zuko's attempts to refute her claims, Azula descended into another one of her episodes, alleging that their mother had sent the Water Tribe siblings to impede their progress. As she angrily prepared to unleash a lightning bolt at Rafa and Misu, Zuko intervened, positioning himself between them and his sister's imminent attack. After deflecting his sister's attack, Zuko urged Katara and Sokka to subdue her, but Aang intervened and summoned the Mother of Faces. Though she agreed to grant only one request, Zuko sacrificed his chance to learn of his mother's fate so Misu could ask for a new face for her brother. However, Azula interrupted, demanding information about Ursa. The spirit disclosed that Ursa now lived under the identity of Noriko. Azula immediately departed to confront her mother, prompting Sokka and Zuko to pursue her, opting for a quicker route. Upon reaching Noren's residence and noticing Azula's absence, Zuko acquiesced to joining the family for dinner, urged by Kiyi and Noren. Directing his attention to Noriko, he inquired about her happiness, prompting Noren to halt Zuko's departure. Persuading his guest to disclose his identity, Zuko revealed himself directly to Noriko. Recognizing Zuko by his scar, Noren apologized for withholding the truth regarding Ursa. After reminiscing with Ursa about her past and the alterations to her face and memory, Noren disclosed to Zuko his true identity as Ikem. Asserting that Hira'a was his true home alongside his mother, sister, and father, Zuko's declaration left Noren speechless. However, before the conversation could progress, Azula dramatically entered through the roof, determined to kill her mother. Zuko intervened, engaging in a fierce struggle with his sister in an attempt to prevent harm to Ursa. Despite his efforts, Azula managed to pin Ursa against the wall. Zuko Zuko swiftly intervened, separating Azula from their mother, and a brief skirmish ensued between the siblings. During the confrontation, Azula questioned Zuko's motives, expressing disbelief that he continued to fight despite his desire to be free from the burdens of the throne, and questioned why he hadn't disposed of her in the letter when he had the chance. Zuko affirmed the throne was his rightful destiny and acknowledged that despite their complicated relationship, Azula remained his sister. However, Azula abruptly blasted through a nearby house wall and fled toward Forgetful Valley. Despite Zuko's attempts to call her back and offer assistance, she disregarded his pleas and hastily departed, leaving the letter behind. During that moment, the Mother of Faces manifested, inquiring if Ursa desired to reclaim her former existence. Despite Zuko's attempts to dissuade her, reminding her of the life she had built, Ursa accepted the spirit's proposition. The following day, Zuko and Ursa engaged in a heartfelt conversation about their shared past, during which Ursa expressed regret for not loving her children enough and for neglecting Zuko. Zuko reassured her, asserting that he was proud of the life he had forged, regardless of her past actions. He then handed Ursa the letter revealing Noren as his father, but she admitted that the contents were false. Despite his disappointment upon learning that Ozai was indeed his biological father, Zuko found solace in accepting things as they were meant to be. Expressing his desire to uncover the truth about his mother's history, Zuko listened intently as Ursa vowed to recount everything from the beginning. Later, Zuko once again entrusted his Fire Lord responsibilities to his uncle, tasking him with representing the Fire Nation at the announcement of Yu Dao's new coalition government. Meanwhile, he focused on supporting Ursa and her family during their visit to the capital city, marking their first reunion since her exile. Kimorikage Conspiracy. Before accompanying Ursa, Noren, and Kiyi back to the Fire Nation capital for their first return since Ursa's exile, Zuko dedicated weeks to scouring the Forgetful Valley in hopes of locating his sister, without success. As they embarked on their journey to the capital, Zuko reassured his mother that everything would unfold smoothly. However, he felt a tinge of embarrassment when she remarked on his perennially sparky look whenever he was enthusiastic, brushing it off by acknowledging his role as Fire Lord. When Ursa became upset over Kiyi's apparent rejection, Zuko attempted to console her, assuring her that things would eventually settle, though he found it challenging to truly comfort his mother. After a while, Zuko observed Aang, Katara, and Sokka preparing Appa for departure. Curious about their plans, he learned that returning to the city would evoke numerous memories they needed to confront as a family and reconcile with. Agreeing with their sentiment, he expressed gratitude to his friends for their support. As they embarked on their journey, Zuko noticed his mother standing alone, visibly upset. Concerned, he inquired about her well-being, only to receive a vague response of fine. When she questioned if the others had already left, Zuko apologized for not escorting her to bid farewell, admitting he hadn't realized she was still present on the deck. Observing his mother's somber demeanor, Zuko once again inquired about her well-being, but she dismissed his concern, stating that she needed some fresh air. Persisting, Zuko reassured her that Kiyi would eventually understand that Ursa remained the same person despite her changed appearance. Ursa confessed that her thoughts were preoccupied with Azula, wondering if she was safe, warm, and happy. Zuko shared that he had tirelessly searched the Forgetful Valley for weeks without success, implying that Azula did not want to be found. Despite this, Zuko assured Ursa that Azula was resilient and capable of surviving, though he admitted uncertainty about what happiness meant for his sister. Taking his mother's cold hand, Zuko suggested they head below deck to warm up. However, their plans were interrupted by a messenger hawk from the Kyoshi warriors, warning of a potential ambush by the new Ozai society on the main road to the capital. Although asked if anything was amiss, Zuko downplayed the situation, affirming his commitment to safeguard everyone, particularly Kiyi, and promising to handle the threat with all his power. Zuko promptly dispatched the messenger hawk back to Suki, outlining his strategy to deploy a decoy traveling along the main road while he and Ursa's family opted for a concealed route, directing his ship away from Harbor City. The following morning, Ursa questioned the deviation from their planned route as they missed Harbor City, only to be surprised by the emergence of a submarine from underwater. Iroh surfaced first, warmly embracing his nephew before reuniting with Ursa. Upon learning that Iroh volunteered to act as his decoy, Zuko expressed concern due to their dissimilar appearances, but his uncle reassured him, explaining that the crowd would only see his hand waving from the carriage. Zuko and Ursa's family boarded the submarine to proceed along the hidden route. As Zuko's convoy journeyed through the forest, they fell into an ambush orchestrated by the new Ozai society. Utilizing dynamite, the attackers collapsed trees to ensnare them, with their leader demanding Zuko abdicate the throne to secure his family's safety. Refusing to yield his rightful position to anonymous aggressors, Zuko countered with firebending. Amid the skirmish, Suki launched a signal flare to alert their whereabouts before Zuko and the Kyoshi warriors were were subdued by bolas. Intent on punishing Zuko for his resistance, the society threatened to immolate the carriage holding his family. However, one member, Kalo, balked at the extreme measure and liberated Zuko. When questioned about his motives, Kalo revealed his association with Mai, prompting skepticism from the group until Zuko vouched for him upon his plea of misinformation. Tension rose as a spear pierced the carriage, prompting Zuko's panicked reaction to ensure his family's safety, leading to their capitulation and retreat. Upon reaching the palace, Zuko expressed gratitude to the Kyoshi warriors for their assistance, then sought out Suki to inquire about Mai's whereabouts. Upon learning that Suki knew Mai's current residence, Zuko secured her assurance that he could visit Mai whenever he wished. As Kiyi dragged Noran off for a palace tour, she affectionately referred to Zuko as Zuzu, a term he found more endearing from her than from Azula. While offering to escort Ursa to her former room, she opted for a guest room instead. Turning to Iroh, Zuko extended his gratitude for his aid and expressed concern for Ursa's well-being, to which Iroh assured him that she needed time. Observing Zuko's distress, Iroh prompted him to share his troubles, leading Zuko to confide in his uncle about the rising threat of the new Ozai society, prompting him to delegate his duties to Iroh for the Yudao inauguration ceremony. A month later, upon learning of Tom Tom's kidnapping, Zuko hurried to Mura's flower shop, where he overheard Mai mentioning the Kumorikage, mythical spirits known for abducting children, prompting him to seek the Avatar's assistance. Upon Aang's arrival, Zuko, Mai, Kalo, and Constable Sung briefed him on the situation before being interrupted by Ukano, Mai's father, who barged into the meeting. Ukano urged Zuko to implement a curfew and form a task force to combat the dark spirits as a display of the Fire Nation's strength, but Zuko opted to seek Aang's advice on prioritizing the search for Tom Tom. As Ukano was escorted out by Sung, he accused Zuko of being an imposter to the throne, prompting Zuko to recognize his voice and question Mai about her father's involvement with the new Ozai society, to which she denied any connection. To learn more about the Kumorikage, Zuko, accompanied by Aang, Mai, and Kalo, visited the High Temple. Mai reminisced with Kalo about a previous date she had with Zuko at the burial sites of his ancestors. At the temple, they met with the great sage Shu, who granted them access to the Dragonbone catacombs. Passing by the tombs of previous Fire Lords and a mural depicting the Sun Warriors, they encountered a metal door blocking further passage. Zuko explained that Sozin had sealed off this section to manipulate Fire Nation history. Attempting firebending on the 4 dragon statues, inspired by the lock mechanism on Crescent Island, proved futile after 20 attempts. Kalo intervened, revealing that the locks were located in the dragon's noses, not their mouths, and utilized Mai's knives to unlock them. Continuing down the passage, they reached a painting depicting the first Fire Lord and the Kumorikage. Nearby, Mai discovered a scroll detailing the legend of the Kumorikage, including dark deeds of the warlord Taz. Aang pondered the absence of his past life during that era, prompting Zuko to suggest the possibility that the Avatar did not exist at that time. After the story concluded, a wisp of smoke emerged from the Kumorikage painting. Despite Zuko's reluctance, Aang followed the wisp, prompting Kalo to open another dragon statue where it disappeared. Aang ventured down the passage, leaving Zuko alone with Mai, which led to an awkward conversation about their past relationship. Upon Aang and Kalo's return from the crypt, they disclosed encountering a Kumorikage, who asserted that the spirits had not returned to the human world until that moment. This revelation led Mai to suspect that Tom Tom's abductors might be imposters. They soon encountered Ukano and Sung, who had organized a volunteer militia called the Safe Nation Society in response to the increasing abductions by dark spirits, including Sung's own son. Despite Zuko's promise to find Sung's son, he had to suspend him for undermining his authority, and he ordered Ukano to disband the Safe Nation Society under the threat of imprisonment, a decision Aang found too harsh. Zuko defended his action, claiming he had no other choice. However, a citizen approached him and respectfully informed him that the Safe Nation Society had just rescued her daughter, which made Zuko's efforts pale in comparison. Returning to the palace, Zuko passed by Ursa's family's room, where Kiyi pleaded to be separated from Ursa's cold grasp. Zuko complied, moving her to another room. Later, he discovered Tom Tom's ordeal with Suki on a balcony, pondering whether the boy would ever be the same. Suddenly, they noticed smoke emanating from Kiyi's room. Joined by Aang and Ty Lee, they witnessed 3 figures resembling Kumorikage attempting to kidnap Kiyi. Aang attacked one with firebending and received a kick in the stomach, confirming that they were indeed human. Zuko managed to take down one of the false Kumorikage and demanded to know where her friends were taking his sister. His opponent responded by shooting lightning, causing Zuko to realize it was Azula. Zuko redirected her lightning only for Azula to redirect it back at him before vanishing. The following day, General Mack delivered a troubling report. 13 children had been abducted by the imposter Kumorikage, causing panic among the citizens, many of whom began fleeing the capital. Mai then appeared and offered her condolences, embracing Zuko. Learning of Azula's involvement, Mai revealed that her father led the new Ozai society and might have knowledge of the false Kumorikage, including Azula's role. In response, Zuko ordered a citywide lockdown and instructed General Mack to search every residence for Ukano and members of the Safe Nation Society. Aang Aang objected, suggesting he could negotiate with Ukano, but Zuko, despite acknowledging his friend's wisdom, believed Aang's approach had failed and had Suki and Ty Lee escort him out. Matt carried out Zuko's orders, leading to a confrontation with the Safe Nation Society, who incited a riot. Despite their resistance, they were eventually subdued, though Ukano managed to evade capture. Zuko reassured Mai, holding her hand as he promised to find her father. However, Mai withdrew her hand abruptly upon seeing Kalo escorted alongside the members of the Safe Nation Society. Despite Kalo's protests of innocence, Zuko accused him of being a double agent, relenting only when Mai dismissed his suspicions as unfounded. Kalo urged Zuko to accept that Mai had moved on. Aang, Suki, and Ty Lee approached, eager to share something with Zuko, but the Fire Lord opted to follow General Mac's counsel to prepare for potential unrest, prompting Aang to ferry him back to the palace on an air scooter. Upon reaching the location where Azula and her companions vanished, Aang revealed a hidden passage unlocked by Ty Lee. While the Kyoshi warriors stayed behind, Zuko and the rest followed the passage and arrived at the Garden of Tranquil Souls, where they were ambushed by Azula and her allies. Amidst the chaos of battle, Zuko caught sight of Azula and pursued her into a crypt beneath a lion turtle statue, which she disclosed to be the resting place of the first Fire Lord's most trusted advisor. There they engaged in a fierce confrontation. Despite finding himself at Azula's mercy, Zuko defiantly declared that even in death he would never yield the throne to her. Much to his surprise, Azula revealed that she had relinquished her aspirations of becoming Fire Lord and believed her true destiny was to shape Zuko into a ruthless and feared ruler. Zuko's attention was diverted when he heard Ki calling for him, leading him to confidently assert that Azula had failed, as her friends had successfully rescued the abducted children. However, Azula countered his optimism by reminding him of his recent ruthlessness. Though Zuko denied her accusations, Azula urged him to embrace the reality of her influence on him before disappearing. Zuko emerged from the crypt and joyfully reunited with Ki. The following day, he addressed the gathered populace at the palace, expressing remorse for his behavior during the crisis and pledging to become a better Fire Lord deserving of their trust. Southern Reconstruction Project. Chief Hakoda extended an invitation to Zuko and Earth King Kui for a conference aimed at discussing the Southern Reconstruction Project, a venture intended to propel the development of the Southern Water Tribe. Upon their arrival in Wolf Cove via airship, both foreign leaders were greeted by throngs of protesters, spurred by nationalist sentiments that had surged in the South following Gilak's disclosure of the Northern Water Tribe's intention to control the South's oil. Stepping out to meet the leaders, Sokka assured them that the protesters would eventually comprehend their plan once they witnessed its implementation and urged them to proceed. Hakoda elaborated on his strategy to modernize the South and foster relationships between all nations to the other world leaders, seeking funding from Kui and Zuko due to the South's ailing economy. While Zuko promptly pledged his support, the Earth King expressed hesitation owing to the Earth Kingdom's own pressing needs, suggesting that he might consider funding once the tribe displayed signs of greater civilization. This mark offended Katara, prompting Kui to attempt an apology. However, the conference was interrupted when a guard alerted them to Gilak's escape from prison. Subsequently, Southern nationalists stormed in, initiating a confrontation with Team Avatar. Zuko engaged the soldiers using his firebending skills, assisting Team Avatar in preventing Hakoda's kidnapping, but unfortunately Kui fell into the hands of Gilak's soldiers. Soon after, a message arrived from Gilak proposing terms for Hakoda's release in exchange for Kui. Reading the message, Sokka informed the group that the exchange was scheduled to occur at the Bridge of No Return, a location historically reserved for dealing with village criminals. Katara elaborated on the significance of the bridge, explaining that it was a place where those who committed unforgivable acts were banished forever. Sokka emphasized the perilous nature of the terrain surrounding the bridge, describing it as the most inhospitable in the entire South Pole, where survival was nearly impossible for any living being. Sokka provided further details about Gilak's plan. While Team Avatar and Gilak's forces would be positioned on opposite sides of the bridge, Thawd and his two followers would cross to the other side to disable Team Avatar's benders. Then, once Hakoda initiated his crossing, Gilak would send Earth King Kui across. Zuko, drawing from his past encounters with villains, expressed certainty that Gilak would resort to cheating, likely by severing the rope bridge. To prepare for this possibility, Sokka devised a contingency plan. Upon reaching the Bridge of No Return, they found it deserted. Katara expressed disappointment at the turbulent journey back home, while Sokka pondered the state of the Southern Water Tribe before the war, concluding that Katara's idealized version of it never truly existed. Gilak eventually appeared on the opposite side of the bridge with the Earth King. As planned, Thawd and his disciples crossed over, swiftly incapacitating Aang, Katara, Toph, Zuko, and Sokka with chi-blocking techniques. Hakoda commenced his walk across the bridge, coinciding with Gilak's order to send the Earth King over. Upon reaching the bridge's midpoint, Gilak brandished his sword, poised to sever the bridge, but Melina intervened from behind, accompanied by the Dark One, Penga, and Hotan. Exploiting the distraction, Aang, Katara, Toph, Zuko, and Sokka swiftly neutralized Thawd and his followers. Thawd, impressed by Sokka's tactics, inquired how he managed it, prompting Sokka to proudly exhibit the chainmail armor crafted by Team Beifong. Aang successfully rescued both Hakoda and Melina, but Gilak met his demise as he plummeted into the ravine below. Following the harrowing ordeal, Kana, Pakku, Hakoda, Melina, Kue, and Bosco convened at Kana and Pakku's igloo. Meanwhile, Aang, Katara, Toph, and Zuko collaborated in the kitchen, preparing a diverse meal reflecting their respective cultures. Zuko, in particular, contributed extra spicy Fire Nation noodles to the feast. Crimson Sail's Armada crisis. Zuko continued his efforts to strengthen relationships with the Earth Kingdom. However, he faced a new challenge when the Crimson Sail's Armada, a formidable Corsair alliance, launched attacks on Fire Nation shipping routes and seized the government's reparation payments intended for the Earth Kingdom. Zuko recognized the potential repercussions of missing payments on relationships with Kuei's government and was determined to recover the funds and goods. With his military resources stretched thin, Zuko opted not to succumb to the pirates' demands, and instead initiated a covert mission employing independent agents to retrieve the reparation payments and uncover the reasons behind the sudden aggression of the Crimson Sail's Armada. Zuko's decision to permit the older Fire Nation colonies to remain within the Earth Kingdom, rather than forcibly displacing them, eventually resulted in the establishment of the United Republic of Nations, centered around Republic City. Collaborating with Aang, Zuko played a vital role in fostering the growth and security of the United Republic, including addressing the rising threat posed by bending criminals in Republic City. During his 20s, Zuko encountered a young dragon who he named Druk. Over time, Druk matured into a steadfast companion for Zuko, accompanying him on journeys across the globe. At some point in his life, Zuko entered marriage and welcomed a daughter named Izumi into his family. He also became a grandfather to Iroh, who grew up to serve as a general of the 1st Division of the United Forces. Zuko and Aang maintained a lifelong friendship, with Aang frequently seeking counsel from Zuko. Zuko, in turn, consistently relied on the Avatar's wisdom. According to his grandson, Zuko remained a loyal friend and a crucial ally of the Southern Water Tribe. In 158 AG, Zuko joined forces with Southern Chief Sokka, Tenzin, and Tonrak to confront Zahir, Gazan, Minghua, and Peli, 4 criminals aiming to capture the new Avatar, Korra. Together, they managed to overcome the 4 adversaries and incarcerated them in a specially designed White Lotus prison, effectively neutralizing their bending abilities. Zuko also collaborated with Northern Chief Unalaq to oversee the construction of a highly confidential prison in the western tundra of the North Pole, specifically tailored to contain the firebender Peli. Zuko maintained his position of authority until he relinquished the throne of the Fire Nation to his daughter Izumi in 167 AG. Following this decision, he opted to depart from the Fire Nation capital and settle on Ember Island. Despite stepping down as Fire Lord, he retained the title of Lord and transitioned into an ambassador role, focusing on promoting global harmony and offering guidance to those in need, albeit unofficially. Throughout this time, he remained dedicated to improving the well-being of his fellow citizens and ensuring the safety of the new Avatar. Additionally, he continued to endorse the policies implemented by his daughter, Fire Lord Izumi. 2 weeks post-harmonic convergence, Zuko became aware of the escape of the criminals Zahir, Minghua, and Gazan from White Lotus custody. He was particularly troubled by Zahir's newfound airbending abilities. Upon notifying Lin Beifong of the escape, he journeyed to the Northern Water Tribe with Chief Tonrak. There they met with Desna and Eska, the newly appointed Northern Chiefs, and discussed the need to inspect Peli's prison in the Western Tundra. During their descent into the prison's depths, Zuko explained Peli's unique ability to generate explosions with her mind. He mentioned a past attempt to dispatch a similar assassin to target the Avatar, which proved unsuccessful. Eska shared her own encounter with attempting to assassinate the Avatar following her disrupted wedding. Zuko then surveyed the prison's vicinity from atop his dragon, identifying what appeared to be a snowstorm. Upon Zuko's observation, Tonrak recognized the phenomenon as Zahir's handiwork. A clash ensued between the 2 groups, with Zuko facing off against Gazan. Despite his agility, allowing him to evade Gazan's assaults momentarily, Zuko was ultimately struck down by a sizable rock fragment. Helpless, he could only watch as the fugitives, including Peli, successfully fled the scene. Later, Zuko and Tonrak traveled to the Misty Palms oasis atop Druk, having been summoned by Lin's message. They awaited Korra's arrival at a local cantina, where Zuko was delighted to reunite with the Avatar. Korra informed him about the Red Lotus, revealing that their assassination of Earth Queen Hu-Ting marked just the beginning of their sinister plans. When Mako and Bolin returned, Zuko exited the cantina, where Bolin, overwhelmed with awe, struggled to articulate his thoughts. As Mako respectfully excused his brother and expressed their honor at meeting Zuko, the former Fire Lord reciprocated the gesture. Accompanying Team Avatar towards Zaofu, Zuko intended to utilize the Metal Clan clan's radio transmitter to reach the Northern Air Temple and warn Tenzin of the impending threat posed by the Red Lotus. However, while the others prepared to proceed to the temple, Zuko readied Rook to return home to the Fire Nation, prioritizing the protection of his daughter Izumi should Zahir target her next. Just as he was about to depart, Korra approached him, seeking advice as Aang's close friend on what course of action Aang would have taken if faced with the choice between surrendering himself or risking a nation's safety. Reflecting on Aang's aspirations to rebuild the Air Nation and his understanding of the Avatar's pivotal role during times of crisis, Zuko found himself taken aback when Korra expressed gratitude for his counsel, mentioning her encounter with his late uncle Iroh. Before he could delve further into the topic of Iroh, their conversation was interrupted by Mako, who informed them of a successful contact with the Northern Air Temple. Prompted by this development, Zuko and Korra followed Mako to the communications room in Zaofu. Following the team's departure for the temple, Zuko returned home to his daughter. However, 2 weeks later, he made his way to Republic City, where he respectfully bowed to a recovering Korra. Expressing his concern alongside President Raiko regarding the limited information available about the Red Lotus and their actual strength, Zuko then entered the temple. There, he participated in Janora's ceremony as she was anointed as an airbending master upon receiving her tattoos. Subsequently, Zuko had a reunion with Iroh in the spirit world. Amidst Kuvira's attempts to stabilize the Earth Kingdom, Zuko journeyed to Republic City with his daughter to witness Prince Wu's coronation as the new Earth King. However, as events unfolded and Kuvira attempted to seize power, Zuko was present to observe her declaration of establishing the Earth Empire, after being awarded the Kyoshi Medal of Freedom for her contributions. And that, my friends, is the entire Zuko timeline. What did you think? Did you know everything about Zuko? Did you learn anything new today? What's your favorite Zuko era? How about your favorite Zuko line? Make sure you let me know down in the comments and subscribe to ChannelFrederator for more like this. Thanks for watching, and remember, Frederator loves you.